damn willies, I'm telling you.
That's right. That's right.
The willies.
The willies. Oh, hey, we got friends with us already. Oh, that's because we kind of went on late. Sorry, guys. BMO, what the hell happened to your rig, dude? Maybe you told us all, and I haven't seen it yet. Oh, you did it on purpose. Okay. Let's see what else we got going on today. Tech Death Hippie blending his wizard with his diesel. Blending of all sorts is a wonderful thing to do. I'll trade my diesel for a Deliverance, not bonding with it. Interesting. Anyone drinking anything interesting tonight? You know what? I'm about to drink something that I don't even know what this is. I was told there was tequila in the freezer. So I grabbed it. I didn't even look what was on the label. So let's see. Let's see if this is any good.
Porterhouse and broccoli. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. And it's a nice Chardonnay. Nobody's going to judge that, my man. Ain't nobody can judge that. Maker's Mark with a big cube. Yeah, babe. Now, do you have one of those things that makes the round cube? We have one of those little round ice cube maker. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but it's cool because it's just one big cylinder of ice in the glass. It's cool. Kofefe is absolutely effing right, my man. Hobarodi. You couldn't be more right.
That's always the right thing.
This being the onset of fall, besides the weather isn't really margarita weather, and there's so much cool stuff we want to talk about tonight. I didn't want to get too hammered. I didn't really want to get hammered at all. I wanted to make sure that I stay on track because there's a lot of cool stuff to cover. So I got my sparkling water and ice, and I'm drinking it. I'm going, yeah, that's about right. And then I went, no, fuck that. I'm having a margarita.
Dueling drinkeries. That's, every time we do this, I have my big thing of water and then I have my alcohol ration. I can't do one without the other. Well, no, that's not true. That sounds bad. I can do water without the alcohol. I actually can. I just choose not to. So this tequila is weird. I wish I had looked at what was on the label. Like on the palate, when you first drink it, it tastes like nothing is happening. But then the finish, it's actually quite good. It's probably like Trader Joe's tequila or something.
Which is why those drinking snobs talk about the palate and on the nose and all that stuff. Because and as much as we hate to admit it and want to slap some of those people, it's actually true. So what are you gonna do?
Yes, it is. It's the same thing with anything that you kind of stick your head into, right?
Yeah.
I mean, before you crack the code, it just sounds like the most pretentious garbage you've ever heard in your life. And then when you start paying attention, you're like, oh, yeah, this is actually legit information. You have Death Star ice cube makers? That, my friend, is the best.
Yeah, it's like the Star Wars thing infects everything. And
infects.
Hobarodi, this show, you're going to enjoy this tonight because we're going to talk about the seemingly crazy ways you can come up with to use gear that actually isn't crazy. It's the reason it's the reason we make the stuff that we make the way we make it, so that you can go out and explore the perimeters as opposed to doing just what you're supposed to do based on what the manual says or based on what whoever the famous person using it does and all that. And so we'll get into that. We started off with the Dr. Lonnie Smith groove in
the whip
in tribute to and as a tribute to his passing, a Groove Meister. And we picked that clip because that's a perfect example of just being in the moment, just going for it. And he and the drummer are like on the same wavelength in that little passage, and they're going for it. They're like, okay, how about this? All right, I'll see you that, and I'll raise you this. And like, okay, how about this? And he's like, yeah, I got this. And they're
Well, you like
it's
the
a race.
hits too because it's totally rock and roll.
It's a race to the top. I mean, it's it's how real musicians that are having a good time and really enjoying playing music challenge each other to raise the bar on each other. And it happens in every kind of genre of music. Just so happens that that's a perfectly fine example of it. I remember when I used to tour with the Dickies, we never did sound checks. We never did rehearsals. We never did anything. So it took us a week of shows just to get the machinery oiled, right? And then after about a week of just like, okay, we've got this nailed. We're like a machine now. After a week of that, it starts getting stupid. Like it could get boring really quick. And so like the bass player starts doing something kind of haywire. And I'm like, oh, I like that. And I'd like, augment that with something. And he's like, oh yeah, what about this? And he does something else. And then we do this 2-part vocal thing. And like we're pushing each other's buttons. And then the drummer goes, hey, I like what you guys are doing over there. And he starts throwing down. And before we know it, the other two main guys, the singer and the other guitar player, who are the main guys, and Stan and Leonard, the singer and the other guitar player, who are the main original guys in the band, are like just turning around going, what the hell is going on over
and
there?
It's punk, so you guys are like really pushing the tempos too, right?
We're pushing everything. I mean, we're doing Sounds of Silence at 120 beats per minute, and we're just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But it's like the musicianship is there to support that, and we're just like going like crazy. And the singer kept like forgetting the lyrics because he's looking over and he's seeing this thing explode behind him. He's like, you guys are nuts. And it's not, but it was fun, and it made it fun to be able to go out and just let go and know that you didn't have these constraints. Just like, hey, all bets are off. And
there's a way to do that where you kind of bring the audience along.
Yeah.
And they feel like they're a part of it. And there's a way to do that where you exclude the audience. And they're like, these guys are just jerking off up here. And they're, almost intentionally trying to lose the audience. And that's always been a thing for me that is a matter of consideration that I've worked as a sideman for so long. And sometimes you're just up there with people and you're just like, you don't care about who you're playing for. And that annoys the hell out of me. Like, you just care about what's happening, underneath your fingers or, whatever you're doing. And you could care less how it's being received. And I hate that. So I'm all for, going off and allowing that kind of energy to come through you. But, kind of in that spirit of like, hey, we're trying to lift the room up rather than, hey, we're trying to show you how little you know about music.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is yeah, that's when I'm heading for the door. It's like, yeah, I get what you're doing, and okay,
yeah, you're great. Okay, you're a great musician. Neat. That's so great. You went to music school. Wonderful. Your music sucks. And this is,
and like, I'm not even saying I'm not even laying claim to being a great musician or anything. I just loved the energy of the moment. Just like, all right, let's like unhook everything and see, see how long it takes before parts start flying off,
Yeah.
And there would be nights when all the parts would fly off and you go, okay, well, that was an interesting experiment. And there would be nights where you get to the end of the set before the gear starts coughing parts, and you're just like, yeah, that was like right on the edge. That's like the race car driver that makes it across the finish line with 3 tires, it's just like, yeah, Just
That's
love
can
that.
be
I
super
just love
fun.
that.
That can be super fun. But again, to me, the thing that really makes it work is, and I don't even, you know what? Having done it for so many years, I wouldn't even know how to define. Like, I couldn't write down for you, like, here's how you do it. But
Mm-mm.
there is an art to bringing the room along with you. And if you're not going to bring the room along with you, like, I don't even want to deal with it. I've been on stage with other incredible musicians who are trying to demonstrate to me and the other guys on stage, like, look how much of a badass I am. And I'm like, I don't care, because first of all, I know you're great, but we're playing music for the room. We're not in a little, like, a little rehearsal space playing for each other. So I don't know. The longer I live, the more annoyed I get with when people don't observe that sort of thing of, this is like a shared experience. It's not I don't know. I'm up on stage to kind of prove
I
my
don't know. That could be a
self-worth.
form of that could be a form of stage fright too. I mean, if you just like,
Not these
I've,
guys. I know
I've
these
been in
guys.
a situation where at rehearsal everybody's like clicking,
Mhm.
and it's like we don't even have to have a set list. We don't even have to have an arrangement. We can just go there and do this.
Mhm.
Just go, set up the gear. Whoever plays the first note, everybody just sort of gloms onto that and
Mhm.
just see what happens. We have played with each other enough to know what the other guy's probably going to do. And if he does something different than I expected, well, it's still going to be good. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
let's just go do that. And everybody goes, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, let's go do that. And we get to the gig. And then one guy has got like, hey, man, this set list, why I don't like this set list. We need to rewrite. And I'm like, the set list doesn't even matter. It's just there in case we forget something or find
Yeah.
ourselves kind of like lost and maybe need a little anchor. It wasn't,
Mhm.
and then another guy's like, I don't really like where I'm standing on the stage. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're just like killing the buzz.
Right.
What did we say? We were just going to go up and not give a shit. And here's everybody giving a shit to the point where I'm about ready to pack it up and go home. I mean, it's just like, stop
Yeah.
already.
You're harsh and my mellow, man.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Of course. You know what? I would just watch this. Uh, I just watched a documentary of Hyman Rickover.
Who's that?
Hyman Rickover was an admiral in the Navy. He was like
What era?
in the God from in the 50s through the end of his career, which was just after Reagan, just after
Wow.
Reagan passed
Okay.
away.
So he
And
wasn't
he
this
was the guy. He is the guy, the founder of the. He single-handedly created the nuclear submarine program.
Oh, like with the USS Columbia stuff going on. No, Connecticut this week. The hitting the stuff in the South China Sea. Have you seen that?
Um,
That's fun.
yeah, yeah. He the Nautilus was the first nuclear submarine, and he created that. Got he got permission from his superiors to go work on this project, and he was just like, I could so relate to this guy. He told everybody exactly what he thought, unfiltered, and he
Okay.
was a freak for quality and commitment to a project and commitment to doing things right
Mm.
and taking 100% responsibility for your part of the project and all this stuff. And he was like, I
Kaizen.
could really, I'm sorry.
Kaizen. That term. That Do you know that term? I think it was
Gesundheit.
that F that Edward Deming, the guy who the American who went to post World War II Japan to kind of help them rehab the economy, but they
Mm.
use a Japanese term. Kaizen is like this idea of never-ending improvement. Like, just that's the ethos,
I should know that.
which it's interesting to me.
If anybody should know that, I should know that.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
But anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted your story, but it sounded
no,
like
that's all right. It was just like I was just like, yeah, I know that guy. the guy that doesn't take no for an answer, the guy that says, we're going to try this and we're going to see if it works and we're going to push some buttons and we're going to piss some people off and we're going to make some mistakes and it's all going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was the guy that sat in the Oval Office with Reagan and a bunch of Reagan's flunkies and said, I don't want to talk to you in front of all these flunkies. These guys are all ass-kissing flunkies. I want to talk to you privately. And Reagan's getting all like twisted and bent out of shape and going, well, I can't believe you're talking like that. He says, well, you told me that we were going to have a man-to-man conversation one-on-one. And here we are with these piss ants that are just like telling you what you want to hear, and they're lying to you and they're wrong. And
Wow.
and so Reagan sent the guys out of the room and nobody knows what they talked about, but they both came out smiling. And he was just like one of these guys that would not take,
He in his
would
wheelbarrow.
not accept anything less than excellence. And in the whole program, there was never a single nuclear accident in the program. Now
Wow.
there was 2 submarines that early on that sank. One was the Thresher, and I forget the name of the other one. On a test dive, something went wrong, and the ship imploded, and all that. But there was no radiation leak from the wreckage. It's still down there, and they still monitor it, and there's still no radiation leakage.
Scorpion?
Or
Mark is saying the Scorpion. Is that
that sounds familiar?
There's I forget how many, like, the United States has lost, I don't know what the number is now, but a number of nuclear warheads. Some of them have dropped into the ocean, and I think most of them are accounted for, but just kind of lost and mishandled. Like, they're out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's still an armed,
some freaky shit.
There's still an armed warhead in a bomb in the Everglades somewhere, buried in the mud, that fell out of a plane that's never been found. I just wonder about stuff like that. But anyway, I just was watching this guy and I'm going, I know that guy. I know that guy. He makes enemies. He pisses people off. And all he's doing is telling the truth and saying, there are some things that you have to be done by the book, and there's some rules that you have to break to make progress. And he wasn't afraid to do either of those things. And he wasn't afraid to take responsibility if anything went south in the process of that. But he also didn't let anybody else off the hook either. He made sure that everybody else was accountable for their part in the projects and in the process. And it's just like, it's an interesting watch. If you guys want to see, I watch this stuff because I'm really into the whole history of the development of the atomic bomb, and like right from the very beginning, from the days when it was all just speculative and theoretical, to
the Manhattan Project and all the actual development,
to the release on Hiroshima. All that period in between, it's so dense, and there's so many interesting like moments and points of history where you'd make a right turn or you make a left turn, and so I'm always enthralled by all that stuff, and I always learn something new every time I see a different aspect of it. So this doc about Hyman Rickover is pretty interesting. It's actually made in 2013, and I was watching it, and I was going, at the end credits, they said there was never any accidents, there were never any failures, and blah, blah, blah. And I was reading that. I'm going, bullshit. I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, I remember seeing photographs of when they found the Thresher on the bottom of the ocean in pieces. And they didn't say anything about it. I go, okay, so why didn't they say anything about it? So I went and looked it up, and it turns out that all the information about that incident was classified until last year. It never was really
Hmm.
formally released and declassified until last year. And the movie was made in 2013 or 2014, so they didn't have access
Oh,
to that.
I see.
So probably the people that produced the thing, produced the documentary, they didn't have adequate information to really be able to tell that story, so they just said nothing ever happened. Well, sorry, two crews of submarine sailors, you know, went to their graves in the sea. But they weren't nuclear accidents, so they were basically said there were no nuclear accidents, and that's true. But we still lost 2 submarines, and yeah, um, busy week, busy 2 weeks, like always.
Have you been in any nuclear submarines?
Yeah, no.
Me neither.
Kindly old gentleman. No, that's not me.
You get to
No.
make your own nickname.
Yeah, well,
Kimosabe. Boom.
Kimosabe.
Boom.
See, when I worked at Valley Arts, there were 3 Steves. So in order to differentiate with the Steves, one guy, he said, I'll take Steve. And the other guy said, I'm Steven. And I went, well, when I was playing in bands, everybody called me Stevie. So I just said, okay, I'll go with Stevie. And
Which was
Stevie Ray
cool
Vaughan
until
Stevie Ray Vaughan hadn't hit the scene yet. So it was just like, yeah, fine. So that came about as a result of working, like a lot of things in my history came about as from working at Valley Arts. And then when Synergy started asked me to participate in the design project for the modular system, we had a meeting, and Dave, who I'd known the longest, was calling me Stevie, and Bruce Egnator was calling me Stevie, and another guy was calling me Steven because we had changed the name of the company to Stephen Fryette Design. And I just refer to myself as Steve, like in emails and stuff like that. So the Avi, the CEO, is like, when we're talking, he goes, "Is it Steve or Stevie or Steven? What the hell do I call you?" And I just said, "Kimosabe works." and because I was just trying to lighten it up. Everybody, like there was so much going on in these meetings. They're talking about the planning and the execution and the feature set and, how it was going to work with backwards compatibility and blah, blah, blah. And some of it got really so serious and so sort of, it got to be this sort of committee drudgery that I just really abhor, in designing stuff. When it's by committee, it's just like slogging. It's just like a big slog. And my first my first reaction when I'm in a meeting with other people and it turns into a slog, and it turns into a slog because people are set in their ways, or other people are not up to speed on what's going on, and they're trying to like weigh in, and they're actually even trying to participate, but they don't have the tools to do it, and it sort of drags along and it gets testy. So I usually just try to pop the balloon to inject some humor in there. So I just said Kimosabe, and a couple of people in the email group were like, well, "What were we supposed to call you again?" And it got to be kind of stupid because they didn't remember Kimosabe. So I started signing my
everybody's
emails.
going to call you Kimosabe.
Yeah, so I started signing my emails dances with jack-offs, or dances with jerk-offs. I started signing my emails dances with jerk-offs. And the whole point
So
was just to
you.
crack people up so they would just get off of it, like, let's talk about what really need to talk about and get off of these super serious,
so
I
you.
think the customer thinks blah, 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 blah. Who gives a shit? They don't think of anything until we give them something to think about, but in terms of presenting them with something that they can wrap their heads around, and then they're going to think about it. And we don't know what their reaction is going to be until they get their grubby little hands on it. So what are we speculating about? We can only speculate what we think we're trying to accomplish and how we think it will work for players that are searching for whatever solution that we're trying to create, right?
Yeah.
So that means we have to have some kind of idea actually how we would use it, and I think probably Dave has a sense of that, but a lot of people don't. I definitely had a sense of it because I know I'm going to pick up a guitar and play it through and go, this is working, this is not working.
But you're just
And
talking about the general vibe of the communication, where
yeah,
if that gets normal, you drop the turd in the punch bowl. And
absolutely. And
it's, you know
and
what
as
I'm
Ed
thinking of?
Asner as Ed Asner famously always said, um, I what was his quote? Um, something along the lines of I feel no obligation to go back and pick up turds I may have left in my path. and I read that in an interview. It might have been a Playboy interview, and I just went, that right
Well, do you
there.
remember? Do you remember? I love this so much. Do you remember the time that I texted you and said I had a problem with my GPDI?
Oh yeah. Well, that was recent. Fortunately,
And you sent me the text. Steve sends me this text
do you have it?
with
Do you have the
emojis.
text?
I probably do, but it just it just said "eat shit and die."
Yeah, but it was in emojis, so it was
Yeah,
nice.
it was in hieroglyphs.
Yeah. Oh well, you got me. You got me in a moment that day.
Oh man, that was the
You
perfect
totally
response.
got me in a moment, and I was just feeling great. And you
Like, oh, a friend with a customer support question. I can uncork the way I wish I could on the general public today.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Where is it? It's
Oh,
right here.
Mark, I haven't read any of those books, the Richard Rhodes books, but I'd love to. All of that sub stuff is really incredible. Oh man, Stephen, you've been on there. Which one, if you don't mind sharing? As Steve looks for the incriminating text, I think.
Ah, here it is. Here it is.
Oh wow, a Russian sub. Oh yeah, eat shit, die. With my loving emoji response.
Yeah, and you sent me the loving emoji with all the hearts flowing out of it, and I went, "Oh, that landed perfectly."
Oh
And
yeah.
then I said, "I bet it sounded amazeballs just before it died." Uh, because
Oh
that's what always
man.
happens, right? That's what
Oh yeah.
every time somebody would bring in their
Oh
blown up amp.
oh
Hey, Eric,
oh.
every time somebody would bring in their amp, it was always like, "Oh man, it blew up when I was doing a solo. It sounded great just before it blew up."
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. In my heaviest gigging days, with my 65 Deluxe, like, because that's the amp I know the best. I can't tell you, well, it's not as if it happened all the time, but it seems like every couple years I'd go, wow, this amp is sounding incredible. And when that's, I had it happen enough times where it's like, man, this last couple weeks, this amp is just amazing. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's about to break. And it would. I never understood what was going on, but what you're describing is exactly the phenomenon that I experienced with that amp.
Hey, Steven, when I was a kid, I must have been about 5 or 6. My dad was in the Coast Guard, and
Oh,
um, down in Lake Union, um, uh, the south the south end of Lake Union, right there, where I don't remember what the area is called anymore because I haven't been there for so long. But the very south end of Lake Union, and then the next thing south of that is downtown Seattle, right there. And when I was a kid, there was a cement company located right at that point down there. It was called something Sand and Gravel, Puget Sound Sand and Gravel, or something Sand and Gravel. And my grandfather worked there, making cement. And so my dad and my brother and I would go down and see Grandpa Bill, uh, you know, working at the cement factory. One afternoon, like sometimes on a Saturday, we'd go down there. So it was like a funky waterfront area before they cleaned it all up and refurbished the whole thing. But there was also docks down there, and one day there was a submarine docked down there, and my dad, just like he's got me and my brother, and he just starts walking down the dock to the submarine, and it says, no civilians allowed, and blah 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 blah. And my dad just like walks right through the gate, just like my dad. He just walks down through the gate, goes in restricted area, and he goes right up to the submarine, and he shouts out to the guys, in sailor code, ahoy. And then he called out his name and rank when he was in the Coast Guard, and requesting permission to board with my two sons. And the guy poked his head out of the submarine, and he goes, "Come again?" And he said his name, his rank when he was in the Coast Guard, and he says, "Permission to come aboard with my kids. I want to show them what a submarine looks like." And they were like, "Come on down." So he gave us permission to get on the sub, and we get up on the top on the hatch, and we look down the hatch, and I was terrified because what I saw down there was this glowing light, and it looked like they were just going to drop us down into this furnace, and we were going to burn to death.
Yeah,
it was scary.
The claustrophobic.
And my dad was like, "Go on down there," and the sailor was down there. Come on, it's fine. Come on, just climb down the ladder. And like, "Wah!" My dad's like, "Get down there." And so I climbed down the ladder, and once we got down there, it was like, oh my God. It went from I'm scared to death to go down there to Pioneer Sand and Gravel, yes. And it went from that to you can't drag me. Wild horses couldn't drag me out of here. I'm not through exploring. We went through all these different hatches and saw these big doors with the wheels that lock the doors. If you need to seal off a part where it's flooding, or the sub will sink, you have to, just like on TV. And I was just like mystified, and I was blown away. We went up and down there. We were on there for like an hour, and finally it's like, okay, we got to let these guys get back to work, and we left. And that was just
man, that's amazing. I've been on a couple of World War II era carriers, but no submarines, and man, I love that stuff.
My wife and I went down to San Diego, and we went on a couple of carriers and battleships and stuff, and it was very, very interesting. It's like the whole thing of the smell of salt water and everything around it. That's just the big thing. But I mean, being on there and seeing the scale of those things is so amazing. But nothing tops going down, and it wasn't even a real big one. It was one of those little jobs, one of those little scout subs, so it was relatively small.
Yeah.
And even the little tiny me sort of perceived it as it's not giant,
Okay.
But it was just I'll never forget that experience. I was on this submarine.
Yeah.
And so when A Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the TV series, came out in the late 60s, early 70s, this little kid, I'm watching that going, that's not what they're really like.
That's funny. Yeah.
I'm busting on them, like, nah.
I've been on one of those. This is bullshit. Oh man. From submarines to guitar. I I had a word and it left. I'm looking at your Esquire in the background, and I'm thinking that you had some work done to that thing.
Yeah, as I said on the last show, my buddy Bruce Nelson worked on this. Now, this is a guitar I made in 1979, 80. It's a
You grew the tree yourself.
no. But there was this shop in Reseda that sold parts. Everybody was building parts guitars all over the place around that era.
Yeah, yeah.
And this place just had stacks and stacks of guitar bodies. Some, good one, nice ones, good ones, cheap ones, everything from the best to the worst. And
Were
I was
they
just kind of
kinda did they have names like this is a boogie body or this is or you're just like, they're just bodies, they're just blanks?
there were boogie bodies, and there were Warmoth bodies, and there were Mighty Might bodies, and then there was ones that you weren't sure.
Yeah.
And I think this might be a Mighty Might body. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but it sort of sticks in my mind that this might have been a Mighty Might body. But anyway, I just saw it and I thought, I could do something with that.
Mhm.
Um,
And is it
uh,
a legit Esquire? Like, is there a carve for a pickup in the neck, or it's an
yeah,
Esquire?
there's a car for a pickup in the neck,
Okay,
and an
alright.
Esquire has that too.
Okay.
But I just thought I want to make. I want to make an Esquire. I just got it in my head that I want to make an Esquire. I just thought it was the
Mhm.
coolest looking guitar.
Yeah.
And I'd played a bunch, and I didn't play anything. Uh, um, I hadn't played anything that really kind of lit my fire, and I was working at Valley Arts, so it's like at I could say to myself, well, whatever I don't know about it, I could go ask the guys over in the guitar department. I was in the amp department,
Yeah.
and those guys will help me out and whatnot. So I bought it, and a friend of mine had a neck. One of the other guys, Louis, that worked there, had a Strat neck that he cut down. He cut it down to look like a Telly headstock, uh, but it was a Strat neck, and it was rounded on the heel, and so it didn't really fit that well, and it moved because it was one of those 3-bolt necks originally with the bullet
Yeah,
truss
the bullet
rod
truss rod,
adjustment.
yeah, from the '70s.
Yeah,
So
and it
the
was a little too thin, and it was, I don't know, it was fine at the time, but um, uh, and I used it with the Dickies that way, and it was fine because it was the kind of guitar that, like at the end of the set, I would just throw it out into the audience, and they'd throw it back. It was just like a fun thing. It was something I could take out on the road and not worry about getting beat up. But later on, I decided that it could be better, so I had a friend make a neck for it, and he made it too good, basically, and it sort of took the mojo out of it. It became kind of like something that didn't. I wasn't
he engineered
playing
out the
it
funk.
playing it as an instrument. That was never really its original purpose. Its original purpose was to survive being in an obnoxious band where just shit gets thrown around and broke, and it wouldn't have to matter. It was a punk rock guitar.
Mhm.
So when it got this nicer neck on it, it was a nice neck, but it still didn't sit well with me. And because of that, it ended up sitting in the case for the longest time.
It
And
went in
then,
timeout.
yeah, and then the lockdown, I dragged it out again, and I started messing around with it, and I thought, I got to do something with this one of these days. I wonder, maybe I'll have another neck made for it or something. And then when I did, and then I played with these friends of mine a month ago, and played a live gig, and it was a blast. And I brought this because it was the guitar that I used on the record that they had made in the '80s. So it was kind of like a reunion thing, and I brought it for that reason. And it was fun to play, and it sounded really good, despite my reservations about the neck. And so after that, Bruce came over to get some stuff done for the Stone Temple Pilots, you know, doing some maintenance on their gear or something like that, and talking about a project that we are thinking about working on for Dean. And um, I just said, look, Bruce, I know you're really busy, but my Esquire could use a little help. And he's usually really busy, and he usually is like, yeah, I'll be happy to do that, but not right
He
now. I'm
normally
just
says
totally
eat shit
slammed.
and die.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we've known each other long enough that he has no compunction to say, go somewhere else, man. I don't got time.
Yeah.
But being the sweetheart that he is, and somehow it just seemed to be the right time, he went, what do you actually need done? And I told him, and he goes, oh, I could do that in a couple of days. And I said, well, great. Here's what I want you to do. And it was basically the neck is nice and wide, but it was too sharp on the edges of the fretboard
Yeah.
here and here.
Got to
So when
roll
I
the
slid
edges.
my hands up and down the neck, I'd get the frets would like beat up the inside of my fingers.
Shing.
I actually even did it fast enough one time that it actually cut my skin, and it was just too sharp. And he says, well, all we need to do is round off the edge of the fretboard and it'll be fine.
Mhm.
And I said, yeah, but it's also too too slimy. The finish is too shiny, and so it's sticky. And he goes, oh yeah, we just rough that up and it'll be great. We'll take some of the finish off entirely. We'll just go down to the wood. And I said, you sure? And he goes, yeah. So he took some of the finish off down to the wood. And I said, but don't take it all off because I like having some. So he went, okay, we won't take it all off. We'll just take off some. So that's what he
Mhm.
did. And then he took
Mhm.
some off the sides and he gave it back to me, and he intonated it and put a new nut on it. And it didn't have a string tree. He put a string tree on it. And he says, and you should change those tuning gears too, because there's a lot better ones now. And I'm like, I've never had a problem with the tuning gears. I've never had a problem with it. It tunes just fine. So let's not go overboard. All right. He says, that bridge, no, 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 no. I don't want to change the personality. I just want to make it easier to play. He goes, okay, gotcha, gotcha. So he did that and he gave it back to me a couple weeks ago. And it is amazing to play now. It's just like, wow. It went from, yeah, it's all right, to this is back to my top number one instrument again.
Wow.
Blew my mind.
Wow.
And so it's got a 68 telly pickup on it. And
A
I
legit 68 telly pickup.
a legit 68 telly pickup, and I
Now,
wrapped it in copper.
you've told me where you got it from, but tell the people how you got that thing, because that's a
The
fun.
pickup, the same
Yeah,
guy that I got the neck from, Louis at Valley
the
Arts.
original neck.
The
The
original
original
neck.
neck. Yeah.
Yeah,
He just had it in his stash of parts.
yeah,
And so this was around 1980.
yeah. 79, 80, late 79, early 80.
So like in 1980, you're not looking at a 68 Strat pickup. I mean, telly pickup like it's anything special. You know, it's just an old
Just
pickup,
like, oh
whatever.
yeah, that'll do.
You know, so
You say it sounds good? Yeah, it sounds good. Okay.
it's like a 2009 pickup now or something. You know, like
Yeah. This will do.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
Will
funny.
will sound come out of it? Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah, yeah.
That's about as far as.
And now it's actually worth mentioning the year because it's special now, because 68 is
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
special now. Yeah, that's nuts. So how would you rate the kind of the output of that pickup? Is it
It's a little on the
strong?
hot side, actually.
Okay.
Um, So I just like falling in love with playing it again, and I started messing around with gear, and it's just like every time I plug it in now, and no matter what the rig is, if it's a big rig, if it's a little rig, if it's a big amp, a little amp, if it's a high gain rig, or if it's a clean thing, it's just like it's the go-to now. It's
Mhm.
just like, okay,
The main
I've
ride.
had it's been my it's we've been joined at the hip for 40 years, and I know it inside and out. So I know that what I hear out of it, even though it isn't necessarily what anybody else would play to get maybe that particular sound for their music,
Mhm.
it's reliable. I know what's coming out of it. So anything that I evaluate using it, I know what I'm hearing so that I
Mhm.
can eliminate the guitar, and what is left is what the rig is doing.
Ooh, that's a really, really, really great point that
Yeah.
we could talk about a
Yeah.
lot. We could jump off that all
Yeah.
kinds.
And I mean, we titled the show "The Zen and the Art of guitar rigs, because there is a center that you occupy, and that is the music that inspires you, and the things that inspire you to play the music that makes you enjoy playing music. And it has to start somewhere. It can start from a guitar, it can start from an amp, it can start from uh, a chord pattern, or whatever it starts from, whatever the root of it is. uh, that's where you start, and you build things out. And what I like to think of as what I do and what our company does is we extract uh, the outcome of that somehow, and say, in order to get a particular outcome, certain things have to happen with the gear, and there are a variety of things that you need to incorporate into it to get that outcome. And one of them is that the understanding that the people that are playing, every player is different. Everybody has a different point, a jumping off point. Everybody has a different point of inspiration. Everybody has a different way of playing the guitar, the way of doing a tremolo, the kind of picks they use, how hard they play, the kind of chords what their music education was that drew them to be able to play an instrument a certain way, and all those things. Everybody is as different as the next person can possibly be. How do you make gear for a wide variety of different kind of players like that? Well, you don't. You make gear as close, approximate as closely as you can the idea that somebody, it's there's enough DNA built into there where a lot of different people could find their way through it and find something that that lights it for them, you know. And so that's reduced from a variety of things to some essential things.
Okay.
Um, generally, how guitars behave, and generally how people play electric guitars, and the concept that the amp is actually part of the guitar. Is they're one and the same as far as in regards to being an instrument. They are one
They
and the
are.
same. They
They are.
aren't the guitar one thing and the amp another thing.
Right.
There
That is the
is
electric
gear
guitar.
out there where the guitar is the instrument and the other stuff is the appliance. And modelers come to mind. uh, Solid state amps uh, that, like modelers, purport to emulate what tube amps do. and and my attitude is always, well, if you're emulating what tube amps do, then why don't you just get a
But I
tube
would
amp?
still argue, like, you're really not gonna do much with an electric guitar unless you have the other end of it, whether it be a tube amplifier, solid state amplifier, model, or whatever. They're joined, they're conjoined. You have to have them both.
Yeah, and and a lot of times I'll come up with an idea for a song or a riff or something, and I'll record it. I'll play it just acoustically on an electric guitar, and oh, that's a cool riff, and I'll record it.
Mhm.
And then it might be 4 o'clock in the morning, and I want to wake everybody up, so I just like quietly go in another room and just record it on my iPhone acoustically. And then on the weekend, I play it back and I play the riff on the guitar through an amp, blah blah blah, and I go, "That's a shitty riff. Why did I think that was so good?" You know, uh, it's funny about that stuff. So,
Right.
um, the amplifier has to have just some sort of personality and some sort of thing that it gives back when you play it, so that you feel like you put something into it and you got something back out of it, which is this interplay.
Mhm.
And um and it could be any amp, really. It could be any guitar, like something
Sure.
extra cool about crusty cheap parts all honed into fine balance, and that can be accidental.
Mhm.
And an accidental combination of a guitar and an amp could result in an iconic signature sound that everybody else wants to sort of appropriate because it's so cool, and that a lot of times has way more to do than what the player did with it than the actual combination of the guitar and the amp. But it just so happens that X player used that guitar and that amp to get that sound, and so
Well,
I'm inspired by that. How do I get that? Well,
right.
you could go buy that guitar and buy that amp, but it's going to be different, and that's going to be different, and you're going to be different. So it's not going to really happen. The best thing that you can do is be inspired by that, and then move yourself to the next level as a result of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's always going to happen. That's always going
Hmm.
to happen, and you always got to just um, be open-minded to the idea that you're going to start from that point, and then something's going to inspire you. What happens with me is I get inspired uh, to produce something or build something or design something based on some feedback I get, or in the case of the synergy thing, basically hired to be part of a team to come up with a way to improve and expand the utility of the modular amp concept.
Hmm.
And sitting around at a table, uh, eating sushi and sake shots, and people are like putting down their wish lists, and I'm just thinking, yeah, but how's it going to feel? How's it going to sound? What's going to make it like really behave like a real amp?
Hmm.
I mean, what we're talking about is we're making a preamp,
Right.
and and
And we're calling it an amp,
yeah,
right?
and it's not an amp; it's preamp.
Right.
So we need to get. So what I'm doing while this list is being generated, what I'm doing is I'm going back to when we made our first preamp, which was the GP3.
Hmm.
That came out in 1999. We actually were in production at the end of 99. They started really being out on the market in 2000, and we built them for 15 years, I think 10 years, 15 years. And uh but it came out in 1999. The development of it started in 1992 or 3.
Wow.
We were pitching that we were going to make a preamp in 92, and starting building and growing a company sort of got in the way of that. Yeah, you're not going to make a preamp right now because you have to make 1,000 power amps,
Right. Right.
you know,
Right.
and
Right.
and
The
and
success of the pre-existing product
yeah, like,
superseded.
oh, you mean we have to actually make more of those and keep making them and keep making them and yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and then let's make some smaller ones and some different ones, and we need those too,
Hmm.
and heads and cabinets and combos and blah 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 blah, all the things, and all along that process is like, yeah, how's your preamp coming along? Oh, preamp. Oh yeah, really? People still want that? Oh yeah, 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 we want that. We were really surprised when the GP3 came out that we thought it was like dead. We thought when we released that nobody was going to buy them, but it sold.
Wow. Wow.
But
And you released it anyway.
we released it anyway, and it sold really well.
Do you remember
But
how
the
many
whole
pieces
the
you
whole process of that was that the preamp, it started from the very beginning that it can't just be a preamp, because the problem with preamps is they sound like preamps. They
Mhm,
don't behave and feel like amps.
mhm,
So our preamp is going to be different in that it's going to be an amp in a little box, and
mhm,
that's what it became. It became it became the GP3, which had a little tube power amp inside that couldn't drive a speaker like the GPDI does, but it
mhm,
had the elements of that same circuit, just doing it internally to extract that behavior
mhm,
along with the sag control, to extract that tonality and that feel and that behavior, so that it would at least feel like a natural instrument that you were playing when you played it into a power amp. And that was the mission all along. So when the synergy thing came along, it was like, of all the things that everybody was talking about, the features that it needed to have and the flexibility and blah blah blah. Yeah, yeah, I get it. Great, great. Blah 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 blah. But it should really have the sag function in it. And
mhm.
like, sag function? What's that? And well, this is the thing that's going to make it feel like a real amp.
Yeah.
And well, people will be plugging it into a power amp. Yeah, but the power amp is, look, I've been down this whole road. I can explain it to you, or I can just show you. All right. And we put it together, and I just said, okay, here, we'll show you. And we put the sag control in the prototype, and it was like, oh, I get it now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that became part of that. And then the other sort of and accessory sort of features that got thrown on top of it were like, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. We can incorporate that. We can make it do this and that, putting the effects loop in. Uh, wasn't really a big fan of putting an effects loop in a preamp, because really between the preamp and the power amp, that signal path between those two is the de facto effects loop. The preamp output is the send, the power amp input is the return. You put the effect in between those two things. The output, the output of the preamp is low impedance, so in effect, it's a buffered loop send. And the input of the power amp is relatively high impedance and has enough gain to recover the signal that went into the effect. So de facto effect return. There it is right there. There's your loop. Oh, yeah, well, we
Mm-hmm.
want a loop inside the preamp. Why? Well, so I can put my effects in there. No, I just told you could put the effect between the preamp and the power amp. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, but it needs to be buffered. It's already buffered. You don't even know what a buffer is. It's already buffered by just dint of being there and being configured to operate in the outside world effectively with other gear. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't want an effects loop. It's adding buffers. And so the output of the preamp, instead of having the preamp have an output, the output will go to a send buffer, and then there'll be a return buffer, and then there'll be another output. So what you're saying is, in order to get a really pure signal with my effects, we want to add two more stages inside the preamp.
I
I'm
always
like,
thought that
no,
that's just a
no,
misunderstanding of
no,
what an
no,
effects loop
no, no,
is.
no, 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 no. But people's understanding of these things are different than the way they really work. So it's
Right.
really hard to get them to understand that. Well, Mesa did it. Why did they do it? Because they didn't want to have this conversation with you. They just decided they have such a bigger audience that they're going to have that argument 10,000 times. We're only going to have it 500 times.
Hmm.
But that should have been the clue right there. We don't even want to have it 500. We don't want to have it 5 times.
Yeah.
Just take
Yeah.
our word for it. Well, Mesa's doing it. They're the experts, so you should do it because they're the experts and not wanting to talk to you about it. That's why they did it. They don't want to hear about it.
Well, they're,
Okay,
they're the experts of being Mesa. Let them be
yeah, we'll
Mesa.
put it in there, and then you'll have it, and you'll shut up about it, and we won't have to discuss it. We'll move
Uh,
on and do other productive things. Smart approach, but in like everything, for every solution, in every problem, for every problem, there's a solution. For every solution, there's a compromise. So by
mm,
putting these extra stages in the preamp, they save themselves the agony of having this long, dreary conversation about why it doesn't really need to be there. And the alternative is we don't have to have this conversation, but you're going to have interface issues and noise, and it's not going to work really well with every other piece of gear. And none of them are anyway.
mhm.
And this isn't really going to fix that problem. It's just going to put the problem in a different little box that you'll figure out maybe later. You'll discover that, hey, why does it do this? Because that's the way you wanted it.
Mhm.
Well, I didn't really want that. Yeah, we know, but when we tried to tell
Yeah,
you,
we know.
when we tried to tell you the right way, that old 70s cigarette commercial with the animals and the trees and the birds flying around and the announcers going, "Don't smoke cigarettes, you'll get emphysema and blah blah blah, and that's bad for your health." And at the end of the commercial was like, "And why do we talk to you like this? Because when we talk to you like adults, you don't listen." And uh that always sort of like sticks in my head as like, ah,
I
God,
love. Yeah,
please.
yeah, we know.
So,
Yeah, yeah, we
but
know.
in the synergy preamp, there is a logical reason to have the effects loop in there, and the logical reason is that one of the features of the Sin 1 and Sin 2 is that you can utilize it to add channels to an amp that has an effects loop, whether it's a head or a combo,
Ah.
right? So
Mhm.
there's the reason to exist that we always talk about. It should have a
Yes.
feature or a function or a product, whatever. It should have a good reason to exist, and the reason for that to exist is for that reason. Do I have? I'm hearing echoes. Oh, I'm in echo cancellation mode. All right. Well, we're just getting echoes. Deal with it.
Getting echoes. Real
Um,
fast, Carlos, your question. Yes, I have experience playing the 7th string through the Deliverance Series 2. And if you stay tuned later this week, you will hear it because I'm finishing up a demo video doing just that. There.
Awesome.
Right on, Carlos. Okay.
Using my Replifex through the Synergy Effects loop on the Syn 2 sounds
Be right back.
muddy. I run it through my power amp and it sounds much better to me. So by saying I run it through my power amp, you're saying that you put the Replifex between the Syn 2 and the power amp. I would say that's probably true. Alternatively, you may want to try. You may have already tried it, but you may want to try checking the effects loop. There's a button on the back of the Syn 2 that sets the loop level. And if it's muddy, you may be slightly overloading your Replifex. And pushing that button in will drop the loop level to a lower level so that it doesn't overload the input of the Replifex. That may solve the muddy problem. Because the output, the effects loop level in the normal factory default mode is pretty hot. So pushing that switch in will cool the send level and increase the return level to compensate for that. So try that, and that may be the solution. It may not. It may, because if you're saying that it cleans it up by putting the Syn 2 output into the effect and into the power amp, that very well could be because the output level of the Syn 2 is controllable from the volume control. So you probably turn it down to the point where the level is more applicable to the unit. You can do the same thing within the loop by pushing that button. Okay.
Awesome.
So the really attractive feature of that was that you can use it to add a channel or 2 channels or 4 channels in the case of the Syn 2 to an amp that's got an effects loop. It's a really cool feature. And if you go online and look up Synergy add channels to your existing amp, if you Google that, there's a video that shows you exactly how to do that. And it's really simple. Great. As Nicholson says.
Great.
Fine. Excellent. Gotta go. Love it. Great.
Yeah, that's right.
Gotta go. Here's something that like the self attenuation feature that we bumped up against a couple of years ago with the power station. Just like an accidentally really cool feature that we stumbled across because a customer asked, I'm trying to get blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to get some power amp mojo on my preamp. Is there a way I could use the power station to accomplish that? And thought about it a minute. I went,
let's think about that.
Let me think about this. And I thought about it for a day and I went, oh my God, yeah. And I said, you know what you could do? You can take the speaker output and plug it into the amp input of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then crank the power amp. So the power amp in the power station is driving its own internal reactive load. So you can push the power amp into saturation in the power station. So you plug a preamp into the power station's line in, take the speaker out of the power station and plug it into its own amp in, and then take the line out, which is tapped off of the line out. Take the line out, which is tapped off of the reactive load, and send that to your DAW. And then you can crank up the volume on the power station until it starts saturating, and you can give your preamp mojo. It was just like, God, that was so damn easy. And so we made a little video of it, and people were like, "Oh, you can do that? I thought you couldn't plug the input of an output, and it would like explode." Well, technically, yes and no. I mean, it depends on which output you plug into which input. In this particular case, you can do that. It's a different rule. It's a it's an exception to the rule because of the way it's configured.
I'm putting the link to the revamped video that I made of that concept
Yeah, yeah,
in the comments right now if anyone wants to check it out.
yeah.
Kind of
Great.
fully illustrating how that
Yeah,
works.
great. And so over the course of answering customers' questions about applications for the power station, we keep coming across, yeah, you can do this, yeah, you can do that, you can do this and that, and
It'll
and
squeeze your orange juice.
yeah. So the other day, I was working on my rig, and we wanted to talk about rigs, the mentality, the zen, the mindset of not only configuring a rig, because when you build like a pedal board and get the right amp and the right cabinets, and you've done all your shopping and you've done all your Google research and you've talked to all the people that that you can get advice from, and then you put it all together and you got it all together and like, great, this is gonna be great, and you play through it and it's just like,
Womp
yeah,
womp.
just one more thing. Yeah, I just maybe need to try. Well, you know what? That turns out that box didn't quite do it. Let me just find something like that, and blah blah blah. And after you got it all put together, and it's perfect, and then you go out and do a gig with it, and then you take it home and you start tearing it apart because there's now you understand what you need to do to really make it work. You
Right,
had to
right.
build it first.
Yep.
You have
The
to.
rubber meets the
If you
road now.
build it, if you build it, you will come. You will come to the realization that everything that you guessed about what the outcome might be didn't necessarily pan out for whatever reason you just discovered by doing it.
Mhm.
And that's why people like just meticulously labor over pedal boards and they get it all done and then they go, yeah, and then they start yanking stuff off, and like after they spent all that work, that's just like a natural consequence of the exploration of your gear and figuring out what it does. And it's also why you want to learn as much about the gear that you're using as you can to figure out the unorthodox ways that you can use it. And we do the same thing. And so I'm goofing around with this. I wanted to show something about how the ether behaves. I wanted you to hear, and we're going to do a video demo of it. Joe's going to do a demo of the ether with a couple of thoughts in mind and using it
Mhm.
straight and using it with the power station stuff. But I have an ether and I love it uh, with qualifications because it does a certain thing, and I like what it does, but I need it to do other things in addition to that. And I've been getting ready to go play with some friends, and I wanted to be able to bring that because I've used it before in a similar kind of a situation, but I really needed a couple of more things to happen. And so while I was goofing around with it, Joe and I were talking about the next show, and I said, "Okay, so here's what I did. Here's what I did. I've got the ether. Yeah, I got the ether set up, um, just like itself, guitar into the input, into its power amp, into its speaker. Yeah, great. Okay, so I put the power station in the ether so that I could crank it a little bit, uh, and get the volume down, and so that I
We're
could
simply kind
go.
of attenuating the ether a little bit.
Right. Now, the reason I want to attenuate the ether isn't because it's necessarily too loud, but I want to be able to do this thing that is really cool about it, which is the tremolo in the ether. Most guitar tremolos, the signal is like this, and when it's tremoloing, the signal is attenuated and then goes back to the normal level.
Mhm.
So when you're playing an amp with tremolo, you usually have to turn it off to play rhythm or a solo or something because it won't sustain. Because the tremolo is effectively okay. So if your level is 1 and the maximum dip that you're getting from the tremolo is 0.5, then the average signal level is 0.75, halfway between those two extremes. So
Yes.
you're losing about 25% of your gain when you turn the tremolo on. And that's why it doesn't sustain when you have tremolo. or why it's harder to get it sustained when you're using a tremolo. The Aether is the opposite. The Aether is tremoloing. When the tremolo is active, it's boosting the signal 3 dB. So
I didn't even know that.
two things happen. One is it sustains like crazy when you have the tremolo on, and when you have the level set to where it's just starting to break up, that's the maximum headroom of the preamp. Now, once you reach that maximum headroom, there isn't anywhere for a tremolo that boosts to go. That's why everybody makes a tremolo cut, not boost, because if you lay into the amp, then the tremolo will stop tremoling. Well, there's beautiful stuff going on in that sort of what everybody. Yes, Brendan, we'll get there. We'll get there. Sorry, I'm taking too long. I'm yapping.
Brendan's like, come on, man.
Come on, do it. God damn it.
Show us the good.
Okay. There's a beauty in that you can use the guitar to set the tremolo threshold, and then you can lay into it when you want to, back off of it when you want to, get the sustain when you want it, and not even have to touch the intensity knob of the tremolo. So I went, okay, I got that. That's working great. Works great with the attenuator, and then I said to Joe, well, I got the Syn thing that I used for that previous gig, and I've got the LX2 here. What I'd like, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the effects send from the power station and run it into an Immerse reverb, and then run that to a second cabinet. So it's going to be like a wet rig, a dry wet rig. Okay. Yeah. And then while I was doing that, I went, what would be really cool is
can't leave well enough alone.
Is if one of the things that when you really lay into an amp that's got a nice reverb level is the reverb starts getting overbearing when you really lay into the amp, because it drives the reverb harder. And so you have to turn the reverb down so that it doesn't wash out. But then when you try to play cleaner, you don't have enough reverb level. So it's always a battle. So what I wanted to do was put the Immerse reverb set to the spring reverb sound and get the level where I liked it, so that it's after the overdrive of the amp that's in the Aether, so that I would get that post power amp distortion reverb.
There's the Immerse, by the way. That pedal.
And so if I have that in the loop of the power station, it's sending reverb back through the power station's power amp to the Aether speaker, and basically enhancing the reverb that's already in the Aether. So now I can afford to turn the reverb down in the Aether just enough to get that spring, that natural analog spring ambience, tube-driven spring ambience, without it being overbearing, and let the Immerse enhance that a little bit so it has a more natural overall reverb sound and it isn't volume dependent. Wow, great. And then, hey, dig this, the Immerse is stereo out. So the stereo out, the second out of the Immerse, that bottom gold jack, that goes into one channel of the LX2, and then that goes into this 412 cab. Now two things happen. I've got a wet cab, and I've also got a power amp and a cab that enhance the low end girth of the sound that I'm trying to get in a room with a drummer and bass player, because I've already sort of maxed out the combo. It's little, it's open back, it's kind of like got this sort of a vintagey vibe, and it's got a nice tonal quality. The Alnico speaker sounds amazing. It's got all shimmery and all that cool stuff, but it's got a smallness to it with these guys that I play with.
By design.
It's got a smallness to it that it's difficult for a band with a drummer that has a big kit and a bass player that's got a big bottom end, to cut. But there's a beauty in the sound that I wanted. So I get that by taking that signal out and plugging it in to the 412 cab. And I had tried that before, and it was just like, oh, this is perfect. And I already had the rack put together with the LX2, and it had the Sin 2 in it. And I thought, I'd like to be able to incorporate the Sin thing in there. And it does that thing where you add channels to an amp that has a loop. Well, the Aether doesn't have a loop, but the Power Station does.
Now it does. Now it does.
So now it does.
Yeah.
So now how it works is that you plug into the Synergy unit, it sends the direct out right back out into the input of the amp, so that when it's in bypass mode, my guitar signal is going directly to the input of the Aether, like the Synergy wasn't connected. That's the bypass mode. So that's going to the amp. The amp is going into the Power Station through the Immerse and the loop and to the 412 cab. So I've got that all going good, fine, great. Now, when I want to add a channel, I can use the Power Station's loop send and return as the de facto Aether's send and return. So now the Aether doesn't have to have an effects loop. Your super reverb doesn't have to have an effects loop. Your JMP, your stock JMP, doesn't have to have an effects loop or any kind of a master volume or any of that. Now, the Synergy can add channels to an amp that has none of those things by virtue of using the Power Station. In order to be able to use those amps these days in any playing environment, you're going to need to attenuate them anyway. So you're going to have a Power Station. You're going to have a loop that will replace the loop that you lose by using the Synergies, add features to your existing amp function.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm able to do then is when I switch to the Synergy preamps drive the power amp section of the Power Station to the Aether speaker, and that's the Synergy sounds coming out the Aether speaker driven by the 50-watt power amp, and then the other output of the Immerse goes to the LX2, which is driving the power amp. So now it's got this big girth, and it's such a stupidly simple rig. It's the Sin 1, the LX2, the Power Station, and the Aether. Now, is this a rig that a lot of people are going to be crazy enough to bring to a small club to play cover gigs or whatever like that? I don't know, but I will. And it looks complicated here, but it isn't really that complicated. You've got the output that goes to the Aether. You've got the effects loop that goes to the effect. And then you've got the two jacks there in the middle where that barcode label is. Those go to the loop, send and return of the Power Station to allow them to interface with the Aether. And you're all done. It's a simple
It's not that
rig.
convoluted. And if you look at it,
it looks like a lot of cables, but if you put it all together in a box in a little rack and plug it in, you can go to a gig and plug in 3 cables and be set up and ready to fly in 10 minutes, and it'll kill.
Yeah,
right?
and like if you look, with a Power Station, you can tuck that in the rack too. The stuff on top of the rack could easily be in a rack. So you're really dealing with an Aether.
Separated out and showing with the Sin 1 so you can see how easy it is. So
you're dealing with either like an Aether, a 412 or a 212, and then a rack. That's really it. And then the pedal on the floor, which we have a picture of here. Just that sucker. That's all you're using, right?
Yeah, the bypass switch is the switch that bypasses the Synergy so that the signal goes directly to the Aether. So in bypass, you're hearing just the Aether. And then when you turn off bypass, then you have your choice of the 2 channels of the Deliverance module that I've got in the Sin 1. One of them set like the edge of breakup, clean edge of breakup, and the other one is set up for an overdrive sound. And bingo, done. So I got it all mic'd up. I got it set up so I can feed it directly to the stream. So what I want to do first is I want to show you the Aether. So I'm going to have it in bypass mode.
Get rid of echo cancellation so we go into stereo mode.
I'm going to do all that, but I'm going to be playing just through the Aether right now. I've got the Aether turned up enough so that if I really dime it with the guitar volume, it'll start getting crunchy. And when it starts getting crunchy, the tremolo will disappear. I'm not going to turn the tremolo off. I'm going to leave it on. But it'll go away when I do a solo. And then when I back off the guitar and start playing cleaner, the tremolo will come back. So let's just do that first. I love this. I'm jazz.
Sickness. So whenever you're banging on the guitar, the tremolo just kind of disappears. And then whenever you go back to playing more articulate stuff, it's right there again. It's like turning a pedal on and off by just the conscious will of what
And
you're
I didn't
playing.
and I didn't even touch the guitar volume at that point. I just played lighter.
Ridiculous.
could
I
back off
own
the
an Aether and I haven't done that. I haven't played with that enough.
Yeah. So now I'm going to incorporate the Syn 2 in that. So now I have a Deliverance module in there, and I have the bottom channel set clean with a little more edge, and then the upper channel I have set for a solo sound. So
So we're kind of thinking cleanish, crunchish, solo-ish.
yeah,
That's standard
and
kind of thing.
Yeah, but there'll be a when I'm switching between the cleaner channel on the Deliverance and the Aether, you're going to have a hard time telling the difference. The only way that you're going to be able to tell is that the Aether has got tremolo.
Oh, and important. What's the status of the 412 with the LX2 at this point?
So the volume control on the power station is controlling the volume of the Aether independently of what comes out of the 412 cab. The volume of the 412 cab is being controlled by the volume of the LX2 independently of the volume of the Aether. So you've got two controls. You got one that sets the volume of the Aether, one that sets the volume of the 412 cap. So you can perfectly balance the old school cranky little combo, getting the shit kicked out of it, with the girth and the clarity coming out of the 412 cab. You can set it on you can set the balance on the fly any way you like it. I have it set so that they're approximately equal, so you can hear it left and right image on the stream.
Okay. So we should definitely also just isolate, the tone without the 412, only the Aether, so people have,
Well, let me do that first then. I'll just keep it set like it is.
Okay.
And I'll just I can mute them from here.
Because you have them panned in stereo. So
I
it'll
have
be
them panned in stereo.
so hard right, guys, I believe is the Aether, and then left is the 412, correct?
Okay, well, I'll just mute them from here, and then you'll be able to hear. The one that sounds small is the Aether, and the one that sounds like its girth is the 412.
Yeah.
It won't be hard to tell. All right, here we go.
The Aether has more mid-range, and the
Yeah.
412 has got all the ass. Is your mic on? This is the Aether cap only. Sounds like a great combo. There we go. You know what? Hold on. That Immerse does a really good job of aping most of that reverb mojo. I'm impressed. Okay, so now we're going to the first channel of the Deliverance synergy. A little more hair. And no trem. Aether. That's so interesting on many different levels. You know, they really don't sound like they're that disparate. I mean, you'd think this is going to be wildly different, but they really sound like gradations of a similar voice. And I think some of that is attributed to, the power station kind of being the element that's tying a lot of that stuff together. You can
Yeah.
definitely hear the synergy stuff is, once you move over even to the first channel of the synergy, like it's uh, tighter low end, a little less mids, and of course none of the magic tremolo stuff. But that's pretty damn close.
Yeah. And I've actually got the the power station settings a little tame.
Well, hey, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Where's the sag control? Because when you go to the high gain channel, it sounds really brown to me. Like it sounds like somewhere there's got to be a power section that's like totally being pushed. I'm so impressed.
The power station is barely on. I mean, in this room,
That's
it's barely
nuts,
on.
man. So is
I,
the sag control kind of up on the synergy?
yeah, and you can see it.
Okay.
Let me. I'm just gonna turn it off so you don't hear any sound coming out of it. If you see the light, can you see it?
Yep.
Of the.
Yep.
Am I?
Yep. I can see it.
I'm really laying on the guitar now. If I play lighter,
Yeah,
you
it's
see the
lighting up a
light
little
staying
bit.
on. Now, if I
Mhm.
back it off to where it doesn't squish quite so much, you can see it. The light blinks more, so that means it's responding to my pick attack more.
Right. It's not just squashing everything automatically.
And I've also got. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn.
Man, it doesn't sound like it's loud in your room at all.
Well, it's probably close to 100 dB.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm one of those people that if it isn't 100 dB, I'm going home.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a
Right.
minute, I already am home. Ah, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, but I know you, Steve. I know you. I know you.
So what I'm going to do now is I had the upper toggle switch on the power station set to flat. So now I'm going to set it to bright. And that's going to not change.
We're gonna get some
Well, it is.
crispiness.
It's
Though.
actually going to make the ether more crisp, and as a result, it's going to make what comes out of the 412 cabinet a little more crisp, which will give the overdrive sound a little more bite. It might be a little fizzy at that point, but that's not really the concern right now. And there we go. I turned the tremolo off now just for this experiment.
Oh, and hey, before you play, let me call a halt real fast just to tell everyone that at the end of the show, when we get there, we'll answer the questions here that you guys are asking. We're not going to ignore you, I swear. Okay, Steve, continue. Side control up. It's barely perceptible. I wouldn't have noticed it if you didn't
You wouldn't notice it to hear it so much, but the feel is really different.
Yeah. Hey, okay. What about playing the damn Stratocaster behind you? I love that guitar.
All right, one more thing. I'm just going to do the same thing, the same brighter setting on the power station, but I'm going to turn the overdrive channel on.
Oh, okay.
I thought I was on the ether. Now I'm on the ether. Check this out. If that doesn't sound like the little amp vibe coming off of that record.
But tell everybody where your volume is on the ether right now, because there are no gain pedals. This is nothing but ether power amp.
11 o'clock on the volume.
11 o'clock, and then you're getting Supro vibes.
Yeah.
From 1969.
Yeah.
Clipping. Steve. Yeah. So, Steve, on the high gain channel there, still enough clarity, but it's a little fizzy on my end.
That would be because I've got the...
Which I know you just clicked the toggle switches and didn't do any adjusting on the Deliverance unit, so that's to be expected. And no overdrive pedals to speak of. That's all.
None. Nope. Just the amp.
That's tubey shit.
Yeah.
Which is the way you prefer to do stuff. Which I guess is.
I mean, it works for me.
Sort of the point of the rig.
I understand that people use pedals to do color ups that they like to do, but I don't. Maybe once in a while it's okay for me, but my main thing is
this guitar is tuned down a half step, I think.
Getting that sound the way I like
it. Steve, can you mute your mic? Guys, this guitar is one of my favorite guitars on the planet. Beppo. Michael, I think Steve's running SM57s. It sounds like 57s, right? Okay. That must be the Fryette touring circuit.
By the way, Bruce Nelson also worked on the Strat. It's the Relic Strat. It's all stock. Over the years of playing it, I've unrelicked the neck, just polishing it by playing it. So he roughed the neck back up for me a little bit and set the he reset the intonation and the string height and did all the setup so that it stays in tune better and plays better. But I'm still not. The neck on the Esquire is a little thinner, so it takes me a little while to get used to playing the Strat after playing that. Also, to really get the best out of it, I have to basically change all the settings, and I just didn't want to bore you with all that right now. I just wanted to get.
I just wanted to hear it. That Strat is magical.
Yeah,
it really is.
I basically wanted you to hear how much different of a personality you arrive at by just switching guitars. I mean, I didn't really change any tone settings or anything. I turned the gain up on the rhythm channel a little bit of the Deliverance to get a little more gain and thump without necessarily fizzing it out too much. But
and
I didn't spend a lot of time on it, so it might not sound as smooth on the top end as I could make it sound on the stream.
No, we could get it
just
amazing.
Wanted to hear the slam and the warmth and the punch and all that stuff. But
I'm sure
I also wanted you to hear the Fryette touring circuit, because that's really the magic sauce in there that makes it all come together. I'm telling you, got to be in a museum someday, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Beppo, you called it, like the codec stuff that we're using. Like, I think everybody who shows up on, for the most part, to check this out knows that the sonics are severely compromised. But I trust that everyone here has been playing long enough and hearing their own stuff and things that are familiar to them in a room being broadcast via YouTube, and you kind of learn to do the transfer dance in your own head. Like, okay, sounds like shit on my computer, but I actually know what that would sound like in the room. We kind of all have to do that sort of it's not analog to digital, but some sort of transference calculus in our head.
Yeah, and Peter, the demo thing. I mean, yeah, there's so much stuff that we have to show, and how differently these things work than the stuff that you're kind of used to seeing, because there isn't a lot out there. It kind of falls on Joe's shoulders to try to cram out as much of this stuff as possible. And there's other guys out there that can do it, and they're like booked up too.
Right.
And certain people that you're familiar with, they're not necessarily always available to do our stuff because they might have a relationship with another company. So we're always trying to find the right guy to show a particular thing in a particular light. And also, I mean, we try to get them to do a certain thing a certain way, because they all tend to do demos the same way. They're really busy guys. Pete Thorne, all these, they're busy. They've got, on any given day, Pete's probably got 10 video request backups, and it's just like nobody can possibly keep up with volume like that. And so when they do finally get a few minutes to wrap their head around it, it's all the stuff that's on the top, right? So we try to get together with them and say, okay, we want you to do the deep cuts, and we know that you can't spend the time wrapping your head around the deep cuts, so we're going to explain the deep cuts to you, and we want you to set the amp up this way and play it like this, and when you do that, you'll see what I'm talking about, and demo it that way. And they go, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And then when it comes time to actually getting the video done, it's been 2 weeks or a month since that conversation, and they've forgotten all about it because they've done 20 demos since then. And so the demo comes out, it's nice, they did a great job of it. They didn't get to the deep cut that we wanted to do, but who is going to do it?
Yeah,
But
it's a slice of life,
yeah, I mean, that's kind of, even though it's as inexact and imperfect as it is here, the point is to show you the deep cuts, to show you what's underneath the stuff that you normally hear and that's available, but you got to go digging
Right,
for it,
right. And
right?
and Peter, man, Mark Knopfler would be an ideal guy to play the Aether. And I have to say,
There's actually an Ether in his studio in the UK,
oh,
but
that's interesting.
but
I
politically
actually
getting to him and getting to him to play it and give us some feedback on it is pretty complex.
so I endorse Grosh guitars, and I have for over a decade now. And I wish I still had it, but at one point I owned an Electrojet that had two P90s in it, two of their P90s that they sent to Mark. Mark has a Grosh Electrojet with P90s that he plays on stage for I forget which track, for like one tune in his set. But in that Electrojet are Fralin P90s, and Grosh wanted to get an Electrojet in his hands with the Grosh P90s, thinking that maybe he would want to use those pickups. And the guitar that they sent to Mark with those pickups, Mark played him, but he was like, you know what? I want to keep this particular guitar this particular way. His MO is like yours, Steve. Like, I love the guitar. I'm not changing shit. Like it showed up. It's magical to me. I don't want to even think about putting other pickups in the guitar. But that Electrojet that went to Mark that he played with the Grosh pickups wound up being mine for a couple years, and unfortunately, I had to let it go at one point. But that wasn't the story that I wanted to tell. I just wanted to say that whenever I've been at the NAMM show, I always, like, as I'm making my travels, I have particular types of guitar playing friends that I always try and draw into the booth. Like, you have to come play the Aether. And I'll say a couple words, but I don't want to describe it, and then I bring them back to the booth and then watch them kind of drool as they play the amp. And Mark would be one of those guys if he could only take the time to play the damn amp, because it's right up his alley. Was Rumble banned by being too violent? I never heard that. Have you
I
heard that,
never heard
Steve?
that. I never heard that either. I think there's probably Link Ray probably got more shit for being American Indian than for playing Rumble.
Probably.
But you know, I don't. Why do people why do people use modeling stuff on gigs? It's economics, really. It's economics and time and simplicity. And you know, I saw Stevie
Well, it
Winwood.
depends what
I saw Steve
generation that you're
Winwood play.
coming up in.
I saw Steve Winwood a couple of years ago at the Hollywood Bowl,
Okay.
and he was playing through a modeler, and
Oh,
you
interesting.
know, his voice is to die for. The songs of the great songs. It, you know, it was a great show, but he's also got this thing that he just really wants you to know that he's a good guitar player. It's like you think of Steve Winwood for his voice and for his keyboard playing,
Sure.
and you don't think of him so much as a guitar player. And he really wants. It's my impression. Personal impression is he really wants you to know that he's a good guitar player. And so when he toured with Clapton, there was a fair amount of him getting time in the spotlight on a guitar. And it's not that he's a bad guitar player, he's an excellent guitar player,
It's
but
just he's so damn good as a singer and keyboard player that you don't care about it.
it's so badly overshadows his
Like,
guitar
drop it,
playing.
bro.
It's just like,
Yeah.
Okay, great, but okay. So then on top of that, he's playing through the modelers. So now he's not like a tone master. He doesn't like, when I see somebody that's good, they're good because they just they're not being nice to the instrument, Johnny Ramone. You cannot argue with that sound that he gets. You just cannot. You can't argue with it when he was playing through the shittiest amp you could buy on the first Ramones album. You can't argue with it like the last shows he did. You just can't argue with a wall like that. Just a wall of, I think what Wayne described it as the blizzard of nails. But it's the attitude that goes with it that makes it really like, yeah.
Ed said that.
Yeah, gimme more, give me more of that. That's what sets me on fire. So when I hear somebody play pretty and nice, I'm like going, yeah, great. But when you're playing like at the beginning of the show with Dr. Lonnie, he's like laying on that keyboard. He's pounding on it. He's like, he's like, he's going for it, right? And I like to see that. Well, so seeing Winwood play all the songs and then come out and playing his guitar parts and coming through a modeler, it just sounded sterile, and then you could tell that there was no feel. I wanted to really run down there and just like unplug his guitar, plug it into a real amp, and just like, I don't care what kind of tube amp, just any tube amp, and just dime it. It could have been a hot rod for all I cared, just something. I love this. If you want to move people, you have to move air. Absolutely. That's my motto. That's how I feel about it. And that's just not practical. A number of guys touring that, visas and touring budgets and shipping gear and fly dates. And I mean, I understand it. There's an economic sort of limitation there.
Yeah. But there's another thing.
But other people do it. Okay, so the point I was trying to make was on the same show was Mavis opening for him, Mavis Staples, and she had Tweedy on guitar, and he's playing a Telecaster with a tremolo pedal, or no, it wasn't a tremolo pedal, maybe it was Telecaster through an AC30, so maybe he had the tremolo on the amp turned on or something like that.
Solid.
Barely, I mean, he wasn't like trying to show what a flash guitar player was. He's just playing the parts. But man, it was like I was like pretty far up, a number of rows back, probably 30
You could
rows
feel
back.
the difference through the PA and all that.
It's
shit.
like it was right in my lap. I'm like,
wow.
yes.
Wow.
and and it was just like it was a perfect expression of like,
Yeah.
really, you brought all that gear,
But
you brought that pedal board, you could have just brought an AC30 and you would have been like way better for it, but
but here's the other thing though,
I don't
is
really think
that
that that's his main thing. His main thing is his singing and his keyboard playing, and people want to hear the songs the way they remember them. And he's like, he's he's obviously playing to that, and great,
but the
great.
closer you get to I guess I would call it roots music, I think the more we appreciate people playing through gear that somewhat resembles the shit that it was originally recorded on. If you're a band like Periphery or Animals as Leaders, or guys that learn to play guitar using non-tube stuff, and like it's almost as if that music is more effective using those tools. Like Periphery, I don't actually, no, that's not true. I think some of their albums they use real tube amps, but
Mm,
live it's always the axe stuff. And for that music, like hearing your fingerprints on the strings is
mm,
not the point. It's almost to sound I don't want to say larger than life. What's a better term? Like it's almost not supposed to sound real. Those records are tweezed and tweaked to sound so perfect that it's almost like the gear that would reveal more of. Now this is going to sound like a pejorative kind of thing. Using gear that reveals more of your humanity would diminish that expression. And it almost sounds like I'm saying that that's a bad thing for that music, but it's not. It's actually great for that music. You know?
mm.
So do you see what I'm saying? Like again, what are you trying to accomplish with your art? And then use the appropriate gear to try and achieve that stuff. For Steve Winwood, I know where that dude's coming from. Playing through a modeler makes no sense, bro. I know what his
Yeah, but
influences
look
are.
how
I've
long he's
been
been
listening
look
to his
he's been
music
long
forever.
how long he's been doing it. Jack Bruce made a comment about, hey, it's great that there's guys out there that can just do that decade after decade. And, I appreciate that people are able to do that, and I'm just not one of them. And I mean,
It's cool.
I spent 2 weeks obsessing over the idea that I was gonna have to play through a backline rig.
Yeah, you were pissed.
And I could have been just like, "Okay, fucking fine. 2 songs, who gives a rat's ass?" But I could not let go of it, and so I had to spend 2 weeks ironing it all out so that when I went out there, I wanted to go out like, "This may be the last gig I ever do, who knows?" So, I
Um,
wanted to mean something, and I wanted to lay it down, and I wanted to feel good about it. That's really calm
mm,
down. Thank you. That's really cool that you went and looked that up. The song was banned from radio stations in New York and Boston for fear it might actually incite gang violence. That just makes me love the song even that much more. Um,
no
but talking
shit.
about guys that musicians that use ratty gear, uh, that is ratty gear, and they excel either because of it or in spite of it. There's a beauty to that. I um, Anybody remember this Concrete Blonde band,
Yeah,
Concrete
oh
Blonde?
yeah, James Mankey, man. Hell yeah, of
The
course.
singer Johnette Johnette Napolitano is the singer.
Mhm.
She wrote all the songs. It's a friend of
Yeah,
mine,
yeah, yeah.
and she was like the female version of me. Just like, I don't give a fuck. Fuck all of you. I don't give a fuck.
Except you
She
do
just
give
had
a
this.
fuck.
She had
And
this.
she
Yeah,
did
but
too, because she's great.
she did. She does. She really
Just in a
does
different way.
in a different way. So I introduced her to the drummer in her band, and so they rehearsed, and then they started playing gigs just before her first album was released, and they were playing at the Roxy, and she was the bass player in the band, and she's playing through a broken Sound City amp
Nice.
and some 212 cabinet, and I could even hear what was broken. It was a bad tube that was shorting out. It was
Okay.
like while she's playing. She couldn't have cared less. It made no difference to her. She's singing her song, she's playing her bass. And it's like, what's going on with your amp? She goes, I don't know. What's going on with my amp? That's what I said. Hey, I can fix that so it won't do
Wow,
that.
that's another
Won't do
level of
what?
you not giving a fuck.
Won't do
Yeah.
what? And I'm like, okay, this conversation is over. She just didn't give a rat's ass. I saw one of the last Albert King shows. He played at the Lingerie Club in Hollywood in around 1983 or 4, something like that. Red plaid jacket, vest, and slacks. The red hat with the pipe.
Did he have a pipe?
Yes.
Pipe.
He had the Sherlock Holmes pipe. Oh, it was fucking great.
Man.
He's playing through. He was
Sherlock
playing through an
Holmes.
acoustic.
No, Steve. Sherlock Holmes had an Albert King pipe.
Yeah. He was playing an acoustic 270, the thing with the 215s and the horn and like the. It's just like, really, dude? You went, boy. But it didn't matter. What was hilarious was the
He
guy
laid waste,
playing.
I'm sure.
It's the piano player, the electric piano player. He's playing a Wurlitzer into a bandmaster head, into some cab. Maybe it was a bandmaster cab, but the bandmaster head was sitting on its side, and he was using it as a stool. He was sitting on it.
Oh, nice.
And it had a power tube that you could tell was loose in the socket, because occasionally it would come loose, and then you'd hear the amp go because with one tube loose, the amp will hum, right? And you could hear it. You could tell exactly what was going on. The power tube, and in those amps, it was notorious. The little tube grip clamp on the bass, if that came loose and the tube could move around a little bit, it could disconnect one of the pins of the tube, and it would unbalance the thing, and it would hum.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't stop him a little bit. He's playing his part. The amp would go, and he would just like kick his stool with his heel, and it would stop. And he'd keep playing until it did it again, and then conk, and he'd hit it again. And it was just like,
maybe you could do it in time, and it could be a thing.
We could fix that for you. Like, well, it doesn't need fixing. It's working just fine. What?
Oh my God, that's funny.
Just love that.
I wish I'd seen Albert King live.
That's awesome. In the 80s show, he was like doing what everybody sort of expected him doing. When I saw him in 68 or 69, whatever it was, he was on fire. Talk about levitating. He was levitating. And he was going for it so hard that when he would hit a bad note, he would hit a clunker, and he would go, "Oh!" and everybody in the band would go, "Oh!" And that was like, it was like they weren't trying to cover it up. It was like, Johnny Winter did that. Johnny Winter would play some raging riff, and then he would like end with a real clunker, and his response to his own clunker would be, "Yeah, baby," Just
that's feeling yourself. Yeah. Well, that's truly.
I nailed that clam. I'm owning that clam. That's my clam, and that was a killer fucking clam.
Yeah, that's the Miles
Even
Davis
my clams are great. I just love
that's that Miles Davis thing.
And Albert King had that.
Yeah.
At that time in his career, even my bad notes are good.
Well, anything that you play can be used in a musical manner. So that Miles Davis thing was, if you make a mistake, just play it again as if you meant it. Use it. You played it, This is Blues Power. Yeah, Blues Power. That's a great record, man.
Yeah.
I love Albert King. I actually, I'm the age that like I actually heard Stevie Ray Vaughan before I heard Albert King. I know. But fortunately, like the cool thing about Stevie is he would actually cop to his influences and say, yeah, I ripped that guy blind. And I remember like how crazy it was the first time I heard Albert King, and I went, holy shit, like Stevie got almost this entire bag from this dude. Like he's not even trying to be sly about what he's ripping off. Like it's like this grand larceny.
Yeah.
Like
I love this, Jake. Play it again, then it's modal.
Sure. Steve, say something brilliant, because I'm going to use the restroom.
I got nothing brilliant to say, but I like Hobo Roadie. I always laugh when I fuck up. Yeah, you seen any of the Keith Richards live stuff recently? The latest gigs where you see little clips on YouTube of Stones playing gigs and stuff, and Keith Richards, when he blows it, he just walks right up to the front of the stage and starts laughing out loud and he's like, yeah, I'm an old fuck and I fucked up the beginning of the song that I played 8,000 times, and he's laughing like, yeah, baby. It's just like, uh, I know we're getting, we're doing it right when we're screwing it up. It's almost like if they played it perfect every time, it would be boring. So I'm at the place of my life where I can totally blow the intro of a song and have to start it over again. When you were 20 and you did that, it was really embarrassing and you had to look away and who heard that and blah, blah, blah. But Keith Richards is in his place in life where when you blow it, that was like worth the price of admission to see something unexpected happen and enjoy the moment. That's just beautiful. And that stuff is to be embraced. It really is, especially when it's all in good fun, and that you're not there to hear how the composition is perfectly executed and blah blah blah. You're there to watch 470 somethings just like try to entertain and stay faithful to the spirit of music in spite of it all. And as almost like as I said before, it's almost to say to Grace Slick, you were so effing wrong about people 35 still playing rock and roll, how you thought it was so embarrassing and blah blah blah. And you were so wrong. You missed you were off by 35 years and you're still wrong. You, what is wrong with what is wrong with like going out with your boots on? Nothing, absolutely nothing. In
Man,
Japan,
you know,
it was a really a big thing in the 90s that like you were being a musician was like what you did until you were forced to be responsible. After a certain age, you had to put down the guitar, get married, have kids, and get a corporate gig and get serious about life.
yeah,
There was none of this thing about being a career musician. That was just like a pipe dream. What are you, nuts? You don't do that. You go have a family. You give us grandchildren, and
grow up.
grow up, right? And
Yeah,
here in America and abroad, in Europe and stuff, you go until you drop.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, Charlie's going to miss a few shows. He's having a little procedure in the hospital, and then 2 days later, yeah, Charlie didn't make it. What? We still don't know, but what can you say?
You know who was actually killing pretty much up until the end was I forget his name, but Blue Cheer.
Dickie Peterson.
Holy shit. That guy's voice held together and he was killing that stuff. Like I saw
He
there's
was
a
playing.
performance of them.
It was like Dick Dale. He had to play gigs to pay for his kidney operation.
There's a gig, it's probably 10 years ago, but on YouTube, they're playing, I think Prairie Prince is playing drums, and oh my god, and the original, not the original guitar player, one of the original dudes, I forget his name, he came back and played the gig and just killing it. Killing it. He sounded great. But, he looked pretty rough, like he didn't he looked like he never buckled down and did the accountant job to pay bills in between.
Dickie
He was a
Peterson
rocker the
wasn't going to
entire
buckle
time.
down for nobody, for nothing, for no reason, not any way.
Okay,
Period.
okay,
End. He
okay, all
was.
right.
He
I
was
don't know
like.
much about him. You probably know more about him than I do, but
I
I was
I only know. I only know that that he was the real deal. There wasn't anything fake about that. He was exactly how he came across.
Okay.
which was loud and proud. He kept playing, he kept at it, and people flocked to their gigs. It was like, they
He
weren't
never
like big, huge
apologized for playing
gigs.
Summertime Blues. Like he never acted like, which I actually appreciate. People
Well,
who
they were
can.
the Ramones of their day.
That makes sense. That makes sense. They were a lot less stable as a band than I kind of originally thought, I guess. Like that
Oh, they
band
went
that
through all
did that
kinds of changes,
record,
but they all, I mean, they were doing lots. They were speed freaks. Those guys were speed
but
freaks.
the guys who did that record were only together for a hot minute, pretty much, right?
Well, the original guitar player that played on the first album, he was only on the first album.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The
Like
guy who really created those whack
the
guitar riffs,
tremolo things, and
his
yeah.
bizarre tremolo. He had the weirdest tremolo.
Uh-huh.
It's one of those tremolos that you can't copy. It's
No.
like the Jorma
Well,
Kaukonen, same kind of thing. You can't copy his tremolo is so bad,
what's that guy called?
but it's unique and
I
and
love his sound. Well, the gig that I'm talking about, that the guitar player who played on Summertime Blues actually is it Leigh Stevens? Is that the guy?
Lee Stevens, yeah, he didn't play with them later on. It was another guy that
Well,
followed him.
the gig that is in my head where it's like, wow, uh, these guys are elder statesmen now. It's a gig where Lee Stevens came back and played with him, and it's interesting because even he's playing a Strat, I think maybe with a Floyd, but he's not even trying to hit that tremolo stuff that he did on the record. Like he's not even playing it anywhere near
The
the way he did originally.
there's a
But I think even on the promo clips,
the original album was Lee Stevens, and then I think the third album has a guy named Bruce Stevens who
but you can see even in the promo clips back when that was the single, they had some other dude by the time that they were filming these singles because he wasn't playing anything like okay, is that the original one?
this is the first album,
That's
yeah.
the LP. Okay, all right,
And then I think this is the third album.
all right. Probably
This is
completely different personnel.
this is let's see. Uh they had a keyboard player and yeah, different drummer, different guitar player, and a keyboard player. And the keyboard player didn't last very long. Um they tried doing different things, and it was probably the label pushing them to like be more commercial, or like you need a keyboard player to fill out your sound and blah blah blah. But I just dug the fact that there's a video of the original band right when Summertime Blues came out. It was It wasn't one of the big late night shows. It was one of the also ran ones, like Joey Bishop, or who was the Maxwell Smart. He had a late night show and had different guests on. He had um, Big Brother and the whole company on, and then he asked them stupid questions, and the camera pans the audience, and there's all these people with, you know, uh, Lyndon Johnson glasses and beehive hair. They just looked like
All right.
Larson characters in the audience. It was like they're like politely sitting there
Oh, they are.
watching Lee Stevens with this tent hairstyle thing, just reefing on dun, 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 and they're just like politely going, "Oh, this is pleasant. I wonder when my glasses are going to break into little pieces." It was just really funny that they pan the audience, and the audience were just sitting there like this.
That's the crazy thing.
It's the craziest
But you see
thing.
some of them, it's like the audience shots from the Monterey Pop Festival when Hendrix is burning his guitar and bashing the shit. And then also the stuff from the Lulu show from '69 when Hendrix is on
Yeah,
there. And he's
yeah,
supposed to sing Hey Joe with her, and he's like, nah, fuck it. We're playing instrumental
yeah.
on your love. That's Oh my God, that's good
And
times.
that wasn't out of disrespect. That was just like, you know what, this I'm not really in the mood for this. This isn't gonna fly. You know, I
Yeah, well, I
I've
mean,
decided.
I've decided. Yes. Yeah, I've decided. We're not doing that.
Yeah,
And oh my God, it's and Hendrix knows he's like chopping off his own head. I think he's even playing and in between playing fills, he's like, we're being thrown off the air. Like he knows he's never gonna be on the BBC again.
yeah. You know, we were gonna talk. Well, I guess we did talk about gear and gear choices and the zen of that. And what is the zen of guitar rigs? It's really the discovery of them and figuring out what these things really do. And if you really want to find out what the potential of your gear is, you really spend your time digging into it and figuring out what it does. And then so there's that. And this will go to your question, Beppo. There's that, and then there's just somebody buys something because somebody else bought it or somebody famous is using it, and because what what we design and build are kind of evolutions of existing stuff and designed to solve problems of that modern day players are trying to solve. We sort of assume that the people that are buying our stuff are trying to solve those problems, and in some cases they are, and in some cases they're just buying them because uh, somebody else said you need to have this to do this one particular thing. It never
Mhm.
occurs to them until later on, or maybe even ever, that this particular product does all these different things and it's going to be with you a while,
Right.
just like the gear that you're using it with has been with you a while, and you're going to explore it and
Right.
learn more about how it works over time. And so I think that that's really the why you're constantly exploring and constantly trying and constantly evolving your rigs, because you're looking for you're getting sidetracked in one way, but you're also looking for what works with for you in another way. And
True.
eventually you sort of find out what it is. And maybe sometimes you don't. You're just going through a phase. Who knows? But
Mhm.
what we're all about, and what we always, and why we do the show, and why we talk about all this stuff, is just because it's a constant exploration, and you're
Yeah.
always finding new things to do with the stuff.
Right.
And and by the way, Thomas Blug is a good friend of mine, and he makes some cool stuff, and he's a great player, and he's got a lot of good ideas. So he's a good guy to look to when it comes to, you know, he's sort of into the modeling thing because he sees the convenience of it, and he sort of like really spends a lot of time on it. At the same time, he comes up to me at the NAV show and goes, "Yeah, you know what the next power station should be is maybe something with a little more power." And I said, as a matter of fact, we're coming out with a 100-watt one that's going to have two channels. He goes, yeah. He says, yeah, you know, that's what I like about you, man, is like you go all the way. And off he goes. And then he and one of his buddies bought the PS100 when it came out, because that's
Ah,
just the kind of person he is. He's constantly exploring. So he's a good guy to keep an eye on, because he really does. He really is a good player. He really does have an ear for sound. He really does know what he's talking about, and a great person. Uh, uh, on top of that, one thing I wanted to cover that's maybe a niggling thing, but somebody had raised a question uh, about the Waza tube amp
mm,
expander, which came out after the first power station,
your
and
competitor.
there was a discussion about it somewhere, that about somebody said the reactive load might cause damage to your amp and blah blah blah, and it was a big debate going on, and somebody said a thing and somebody else sort of validated that thing that was said, but nobody really knows if it was actually, you know, a valid comment or blah 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 blah. Why aren't more knowledgeable people coming in and commenting about that? You know, it just seems to be
Why
the
isn't
same goofy
Fryette
guy.
leaping on this? Right.
And one person popped up and said, yeah, why isn't Fryette leaping on this? They have the most to lose by having the competition from another manufacturer like that. If there was something that was dangerous about your amp, wouldn't Fryette come out and say something like that? Wouldn't they use that as a cudgel or as a marketing advantage to sort of jump on that bandwagon? And I just thought, well, why is it, first of all, why is it our responsibility? But
Why are you supposed to be that Machiavellian?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Where did that come
Just
from?
assumed
So
that you would be
just
a
to,
shark on the water.
so just to sort of set the record straight on that, what I really thought about um, what the advantage of a power station over something like the TAE is that it's all analog and it's a tube power amp and it's designed to do its thing the way it does it, and it does it better than anything else.
Mhm.
And you really can't ask for any more than that. What the TA does is a number of different things, and they're trying to cram a lot of utility into this box. Great.
It kinda came from a
Um,
boardroom, I'm sure. The director
and,
did.
and they're obviously looking for, okay, so they see the power station concept and they go, well, they expand on that in a different way. They use a solid state power amp, they use a reactive load, but it's different. But the key thing about it for me and for us was that the signal after it leaves the reactive load goes into an analog to digital converter. And then the switching and the effects and the routing and all that takes place. And then it's converted from the digital domain back into the analog domain and then into a solid state power amp that drives your speaker. So the downside of that from my personal perspective is that your signal is converted to digital and then back to analog. So it's kind of like molested in that way. It's not, there's no way in that product where you can extract the original analog reactive load signal to process any other way. It's got to go through their system. So you're kind of married with that. And although it doesn't have very much latency, it does have some. And the fact that it's a solid state power amp, it doesn't react with the speaker the way the tube power amp does. But there's an interesting other side to that, which is that the I've looked at the curves, the characteristic curves of the behavior of the reactive load on the Waza, and
Mhm.
it's unusual. It's not like the typical reactive impedance curve that you see all over the internet for the various speakers that are out there, Celestians, Fames, whatever. There's a big
Okay.
hump, and then there's a gradual rise, and pretty much all speakers behave that way. And our reactive load exhibits that behavior. Jansur's reactive load exhibits that behavior. He exaggerates it a little more because he's trying to
How do you do that?
incorporate some of the cabinet behavior into that reactive load behavior where
Hmm.
we are not. Why? It's a very interesting question. Here's the deal. When you see those reactive load, those impedance curves online, when you see
Mhm.
those curves, they are generated by a solid state power amp driving a speaker at 1 watt in an anechoic chamber. That means it's in a
No
room,
cab.
no cab. It's called an infinite baffle. It's just a big sheet of wood that has a hole in it that you mount the speaker on there, and you put this microphone in front of it, and you measure it at 1 watt. Why 1 watt?
Wow.
So that you don't push this mechanical characteristics of the speaker into
Oh.
influencing the shape of the curve. What they're trying to do is get the frequency response curve and the impedance curve. They're trying to get that behavior down on a
In as
graph for
pure a
comparison.
representation as possible.
It's a pure representation as possible, and they use a solid state power amp so that the power amp doesn't influence the behavior of the speaker.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
when you see an impedance curve online, and then anybody that's not John Suhr says, well, John Suhr is trying to make it look just like that. Well, no, he's not. He's trying to make it look like an enhanced version of that because he's trying to capture some of the resonance of the cab, which
Yeah.
isn't represented on that graph.
Right. He's taking the cab
Our
into
reactive
consideration.
load is actually closer to what you see on a graph, but only if it's driven by a solid state power amp, which it usually isn't. So that means it's going to be more exaggerated that way. So we don't have to exaggerate our reactive load to capture the cabinet, because the way it interacts with the output of the amp that you're plugging into our load does that.
And
And
you're
then
going to be plugging it into a cabinet anyway.
the output of the power station is plugged into a cabinet, which
Right.
also gives you more of that behavior. So when you add those two behaviors together, you get a very good approximation of what the speaker really is, what the amp is really behaving like plugged into a speaker cab. Okay, now let's go back to the TAE. Why do they have that funny looking bathtub shaped response curve? They're exaggerating it up front. This is my this is my this is my interpretation of why they did it that way. They didn't tell me that.
Your
Just
analysis without
just
talking to
my
the engineer.
analysis of what I've seen versus what's going on with that unit. They're exaggerating the behaviors of the lows and the highs with this little controls and switches that they have on their unit up front, because the speaker is then plugged into a solid state power amp, which makes a lot less, makes the speaker behave a lot less reactive relative to a two power amp. So they're front loading that behavior so that it will
Mhm.
transfer to the output, the sound at the output when you're all done.
Sure.
So is that an exact representation of a impedance curve? No, not necessarily. Is it bad? No, not necessarily. Well, the 20 hertz, there's this big rise at 20 hertz, and your power amp is supposed to not do that, and blah, blah, blah. And that'll blow your output transformer. No, it won't. No, 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 no. It won't.
No.
Why? Because 99% of guitar amplifiers out there roll off at 50 to 100 hertz. So it's not putting out anything at 20 hertz by that time. It's probably down, you know, 12, 15, maybe 30 dB
That's awesome.
from 100 hertz by that point. It's down a couple of octaves. So even though the curve of the reactive load shows this big rise at 20 hertz up to, somebody said, oh, is it 200 ohms at 20 hertz? Well, your amp doesn't reproduce 20 hertz. So it's never going to be 200 ohms at 20 hertz because your amp is never going to make it there.
Right.
So how can that damage your output transformer? Answer: probably not going to damage your output transformer. All it's going to do is somebody that plugged their amp into it, that, like everybody that has uses an attenuator for the first time, didn't maintain their amp, has got the same power tubes that have been there for 5
It
years.
was gonna die
It
anyway.
was gonna die at some point anyway. And some guy said, well, it blew my output transformer of my maybe so, but that probably was not the reason.
Yeah,
And as I just
frequency,
explained,
the dog whistle frequencies were not the cause.
exactly. That's my interpretation of it.
Mhm.
If anybody wants to know what my opinion is about it, a lot of people that don't know anything about how these things really work are opining way off into the weeds somewhere and trying to lay that on the boss unit as somehow technically inferior to the power station for that reason. It's not. It's just a different way of
That's not the
approaching the whole Sonic
reason.
stew.
That's
The
not the reason.
reason, the only beef I have with the thing is I don't want my signal all processed out like that. I
Exactly.
don't
Do
want
you want the DA conversion thing happening or not?
I don't.
That's
Yeah.
the thing.
I want
That's
everything
it.
analog from beginning to end. If I wanna use
Mhm.
an effects processor, why do I have to buy that unit with a bunch of effects and cab IRs in it when you can just go buy a good reactive load and reamp system for way less money, and the money that you don't spend, you can buy a really good effects processor and IR loader to plug into it that does that job way better, and you can turn it off when you want to.
Right.
That's why.
And it's going to feel better the entire time,
Yeah.
the entire journey of the signal.
However, Boss is a much bigger company. They have really good engineering people. They know what they're doing. They're no dummies.
I
And
love Boss.
they're
I
not like
love
the
Boss.
likelihood that they are putting something out there that does some horrible damage to your amp and they haven't done anything about it or said anything about it or responded to it tells you that they're just like, yeah, we don't have time for that conversation. Those guys don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And maybe the people that are like all hair on fire about it would like an official statement from Boss, but I don't think that's their style. And if they don't, I wouldn't blame them for not going there because
They've
sometimes
never been
bringing
like
that up,
that.
sometimes entertaining that conversation just gives it a lot more strength than it normally would have had. And they're just like,
Boss
okay,
doesn't operate that way.
show
They
me the
never have.
800 amps that got damaged using our product, and then we'll discuss it. If it's one, okay. We had a guy blow the output transformer in his 68 plexi
Mm. Ouch.
using used tubes with the amp, full right hand sweep for 4 straight hours. Anybody that does that with a 1968 plexi
You're going to kill your
you're
amp
not
without an
asking for
attenuator
it.
that way.
I
It's
mean,
not the
if that isn't
attenuator that's
asking for it, I don't know what is. And when he came and he says, "I thought you said that this was safe to use for amplifiers." It is safe to use in amplifiers if you use your amplifier with a little bit of concern for what the outcome might be.
right.
Uh, do you pull your car up to a brick wall, the front of your car, pull it up to a brick wall so it's touching the brick wall, and then sit there with your floor on the gas and spin your tires, and then are surprised that you burn all the rubber off the tires and then you're
Yeah.
down to the
I just
wheels?
put one foot on the brake and then the other foot straight to the floor on the gas. And I do that for an hour.
Yeah. So, I
I
mean,
don't expect
when I
any.
explained it to the guy, his reaction was, "Oh, you mean I shouldn't do that for 4 hours straight?" I'm
Oh,
like,
damn. That's sad. I feel bad for the guy.
No, you should not do that." So,
Ouch.
uh, you know, we took the amp in and we pulled the output transformer out and we sent it off to some guys that we can trust to do a really good rewind. And it's going to be all put back together with the original iron in it. So it's basically the original transformer with just new copper wire in it, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be just as good as ever, and he can go
Yeah.
bash it all as much as he wanted. It wasn't like a really bone stock museum piece amp anyway. It had already been sort of modified and unmodified and beat up a little bit, so it wasn't a super rarity. But he was a little sort of he was a little verklempt there at first, but then when it got explained to him,
Ooh,
he's sort of
nice
like went,
word.
okay, okay, all right, all right, all right, all right. So let's just let's keep the conversation real. All right. Let's talk about facts. Let's not talk about hearsay. Let's not ask that we get involved in some hair on fire, conversation that that we have to dive in and like with the flaming torches, and joining the chorus of well, we don't have to do that. It's a perfectly fine product if it works for you. It's just not a power stage. Plain and
Right.
simple.
Right. Right. It's a different way of getting a slightly different job done.
Uh,
Either you care about that stuff or not.
we're going a little overtime, but since we're already like over the edge, do you want to bring up the? Did you want to bring up that rotary cab conversation?
Oh, let's see. What would be a good aside? Well, so I mean, it's not any big wonderful thing, but it's a funny story when Steve kicks in. Um, I think we were talking about the tremolo on the Aether and then just how incredible. Well, okay, I'll say this. One of the things every time somebody talks about doing a demo of the Aether, there's a part of my nervous system that kind of because a big part of the experience of that amplifier is the actual experience of playing it in the room and hearing how it reacts to the acoustic environment that you're in. That's really difficult to translate onto, an audio recording or a video. And I think we were sort of talking about that. And just out of the blue, I recalled this experience that I had years and years and years ago when I was at Wildwood Guitars, and they had two, not one, but two of the Mesa rotating speaker amplifier cabinet thing. I forget what they called it, but they had two of them. And we set it up so that you could sit in between the damn things and play the guitar, and it was bliss, guys. It was incredible. And I think Steve and I started talking about it, like just the experience of being between the rotating speaker. Like, you didn't even worry about whether the amplifier aspect was good or not. Like, just the rotating three-dimensional kind of thing was so amazing that you didn't think about that. And then Steve told me that he not only knew about that amplifier, which, I mean, I was kind of thinking, like, what do you think Mesa sold of those things? Like, maybe, I don't know, 50 of them. Like, they appeared and they disappeared as fast as they appeared. It'd be fun to track one down and see what they actually sound like now. But Steve, you actually knew about them, which I was actually surprised. Not only did you know about them, but you had a plan. And now I hand off to you.
Well, it just coincidentally, a friend of mine was using one of those Fender ones that he had bought used somewhere. And
it's a Fender kind of rotating speaker cabinet. Was it an amp cabinet like combo, or?
I think it was just the rotating cab thing, like the Mesa one.
All right.
So Fender had done it, and they probably sold as many as Mesa did.
None.
But I was sitting at Jesse Ed Davis's feet at the Eagles Auditorium in Seattle in 1968 when Taj Mahal came and played, and he was playing through a Leslie Telecaster, a Paisley Telly.
Ooh, 68 Telly.
Through a Leslie. And boy, was that just the sweetest, most wonderful sound. And sitting there on the floor, hearing it right in front of me, it was just like, wow.
So you could hear the stage level?
I was on the stage.
Wow.
I was sitting practically at his feet.
Wow. So you weren't catching the PA, you were catching his stage sound.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, people have experimented with it. And I mean, that's really where the Univibe came from, was it's like trying to get the Leslie sound in a little portable box.
Totally.
Just like the modeling amps are trying to get all these amp sounds in a little portable box that you can tour with and use and all that. But
yeah,
I just remember thinking that was just one of those things that I think probably what really triggered my sort of like crazy idea was this whole there was this real big thing about the Univibe and all the different Univibe clones, and how they had to be a certain way, and a friend of mine who was a grip for
Kelly chimed in. It was the Mesa Revolver, apparently.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So a buddy of mine that was a grip, he was like an engineering guy, and he like made jigs and made all kinds of stuff for TV and movie sets and things like that. And he had made these turntables. They were basically for lighting systems, but they were turntables that had electricity running through them. So the turntable had to have power to it so that whatever was sitting on the turntable could get power while it was spinning around, right? So they had these movable rotating contacts, a pair of contacts to run 120 volts, set a fair amount of power, to run lights so that they could spin them around.
Wow.
And he told me that he'd made a couple of these things, and that he would like to get together with me and experiment with trying to put 412 cabinets on these turntables and plug them into audio and see what they would sound like. And I was just like,
You're gonna spin 412s.
we're doing a NAMM show. We were trying to figure out the presentation. You know what would be really awesome is like, you want to hear rotating speakers? You want to hear some real rotating effing speakers? So we
That's
were
such a this to Mesa. Oh my god.
we were gonna bring these things and bolt 412 cabs to them so you could come to our booth and have a ultra lead plugged into a stereo power amp in with an effects processor into these two cabs. And not only did they rotate, but there was a foot switch and a pedal that worked them so that you could change the
No, the
rotation. You could make
speed?
one rotate slow and the other one fast, like a real Leslie, and you could change the speed with the pedal. And we were just like going, this is going to be amazing, because it's going to be such a white elephant. It's going to be so ridiculous. It's going to be so mind-blowingly cool sounding that you're going to just go, all right, I give up trying to even top that. It was going to be untoppable. But in the end, we're trying to like work it out with NAMM and having these rotating speakers out there, and they were
You're
going to
gonna kill
require,
people.
well, yeah, somebody walking by who would get their skull crushed by a rotating 412 cabinet. You know, we would have had to have these walls around them to protect people from getting injured and all that. And by the time it all got to that, it was just like, it's kind of undoable. But then we thought, well, maybe we should do it as a demo video. But then it wouldn't just be like,
It can't translate.
it wouldn't translate. Like, I
Yeah.
went to a show and the guitar player had two 412 cabs rotating, and it was the best rotating speaker sound I ever heard, because it was actually 412s rotating. But it was the coolest, and it was the craziest, dumbest thing. But
Well, I think
then
when you were telling me about this, you were also saying that you saw Jessia Davis on the next tour, and the Leslie was gone. Like
Leslie was gone, and
those
my
things
buddy
just
who had the Fender one, the next time I saw them play, that one was gone too. It just like boiled down to, yeah, it's
this is not
great for like
practical.
about 4 shows, and then, all right, I'm done with this.
Right,
Which
right.
goes back to Steve Wood going, "You know what? Just the logistics of this is just too it's just too much," you know? But, I mean, the bands that haul that stuff around, uh, you have to have a budget to do that.
You do.
You have to have people that can run that stuff. Volbeat is a band that you don't hear a ton about them in the US, but they're huge in Europe.
Yeah.
Huge. They've got 3 backlines. They're like the old 90s era metal bands where they've got a backline for Australia, they got a backline for the US, their US legs of their tour, and they've got another backline for their European tours, and they got a backup backline in case anything breaks. So they
You
got
know who
4
did the
complete
Volbeat
backlines.
stuff?
That means they've got 16. The guitar player, Rob Caggiano, uses Sig X amps. So he's got like 16 Sig X's and 16
Wow.
412 cabs, you know.
Holy
So in those 4 backlines. So he's got 4 rigs of that. And those guys sell enough records and do sell out enough concerts and big concerts in Europe and elsewhere to pay the freight for that stuff, and it's nuts, and they
Yeah,
can do that. So
yeah.
only certain bands that can really afford to do that kind of stuff.
You
So
know,
that leaves it
our
up.
buddy, Joe Barisi, does the Volbeat stuff
Yeah.
as an
So
aside.
there's a big economic component to that. So
Yeah,
I'm sensitive
there is.
to that. I understand that, but I also,
But Steve
yeah,
Winwood.
yeah.
Steve Winwood has a budget. Steve Winwood doesn't have to play through a modeler. Right?
And so I'm old school. I've got my twisted, bizarre upbringing that makes me think of crazy stuff. I was driving, we were out shopping, and we were heading someplace. We were on a relatively long drive, and I like to listen to classical music. I was kind of brought up on classical music, so I love classical music. And I was listening to the classical music station, uh, and they were playing um, the
Concerto 35,
the
Tchaikovsky.
the the Tchaikovsky's 35th
I
concerto
only
for
remember
violin.
because I have it here in a window.
Yeah, 35th concerto for violin. And I was listening to that, and I was like going in the zone. And then it struck me while I was listening to that the visual inside my head that was running while I was listening to this music was Tom and Jerry cartoons. Because when I was a kid, that's the kind of music that they were using as the soundtrack for those cartoons, right?
Exactly what Tchaikovsky
So we're
intends.
driving down the freeway, and I'm listening to that, and what I'm seeing in my head is Jerry chopping off Tom's head and chopping off his tail and smashing him in the face with chasing each other up and down stairs and smashing each other in the face with sledgehammers and like uh and then it starts morphing into Itchy and Scratchy, and I'm just like going, "What the hell is wrong with me?" I'm listening to this gorgeous, beautiful music and this visual, the movie that's running in my head is Tom and Jerry, and I just like cracked up, and I was like going, "That okay? Now I know what my problem is, but is that really a problem?"
Oh,
Uh,
man.
I guess if it all
Well
works, it all works.
well, what do you think? I don't
I,
know. Did we have any questions to answer up here that were, super pressing?
actually, there was one question that I think that we can
Oh,
answer.
here's one. I'm gonna throw one up here, okay? Uh,
Yeah. Um, I don't know what month, uh, but I did a blog or a post somewhere about this years ago. Um, and Michael Chambers, yeah, we'll answer your question in just a sec, um, because it's a good question. I don't know exactly the year and month, but Celestion did make 2 production lines of vintage 30s, that nobody really knew about unless you ask questions and ask those questions of the right people, and then you would get the answer. So here's an example. Before we started using Eminence, and we had Eminence design the P50 for us, which turned out to be the speaker that we wanted, that we were using a combination of vintage 30s and greenbacks to try to accomplish, because we wanted all 4 speakers to behave the same way. We were trying to get Celestion to make a speaker for us that would work like that. And but while that process was going on, we were sending samples back and forth and doing. While that was going on, we were using vintage 30s and greenbacks, and so we were buying pallet loads of vintage 30s directly from Celestion. Right around 93, 4, we had a distributor in Germany, um, that used to do distribution for Mesa, and he contacted us and he said he had a couple of pallets of vintage 30s that he wanted to unload, and would we be interested? And he gave us an attractive price, so we bought them from him. I think there were 4 pallets of them, and so we got those,
they were special.
and we we loaded the cabinets with them, and then we started doing the QC process, and I started hearing these cabinets, and I'm like, "What's going on with these? Did you wire these right?" And guy goes, "Yeah, I just wired them like I always wire them." And so we took a cabinet that had the vintage series with the stock over the stock OEM vintage series that we've been buying, and put it side by side with this cabinet of these speakers that we got from this guy in Germany. And the
Keep
ones that
going.
we got from the guy in Germany were fuller sounding than the stock vintage 30s. And so I contacted Celestion and I got the T number off of them. And I don't remember what it was right now, so I don't know if I can verify without having my data in front of me that I had all written out. I don't have that information right at the top of my head. However,
It was a what the fuck
we
call.
contacted Celestion and I said, I want to buy the T number that's on these speakers. And they said, We can't sell you those. That's a proprietary T number. But
Oh,
if you describe the sound that you want the speakers to sound like, we'll make one like that with your own dedicated T number. I went, okay. So we'll send you one. So we took the labels off of the speaker and stripped it all down so it didn't have T numbers or anything like on it. We just sent them their own raw speaker back and said, we want a speaker that sounds like this.
yeah.
We
We'll play this
played it a
game.
little bit and we want it to sound like this. And they went, okay. They assigned to us a T number for that same speaker. And then they said that they would make it and they gave us a minimum order quantity and we agreed to that. And then when it came down to actually buying them, they said, oh, now you need to buy a whole container load of them. I said, wait a minute, you said the minimum order quantity was 4 pallets and we're ready to buy 4 pallets, not 20. No, you got to buy 20. And that kind of led to the end of the relationship with Celestion with us because they totally pulled the rug. They made us go through that whole process and then they pulled the rug out from under us at the end of it. And we just went, fine. Eminence helped us out. But in that process, we identified 4 different vintage 30 T numbers. There might have been 5, but there was definitely 4. And one of them was the Mesa one, and then there was one for the 8 ohm speaker and one for the 16 ohm speaker, and then there was one for the different version of the 16 ohm speaker, which was it turned out that they were running 2 production lines. There was the production line of the speaker that was the original vintage 30, and Mesa had been buying that speaker not as a special item, a specialty number. They had just been buying the vintage 30s the way they had been made, and Celestion had changed the way they were making them to cut the costs so that they could offer them to more manufacturers at a lower price.
Okay.
Mesa was buying enough of them to get them at a lower price, but people that were buying smaller quantities wanted that price too, and they worked it out so that they found a less expensive way to produce them so that they could meet that demand.
Okay.
So they were made differently and they sounded different. And that it was the time where they disclosed to us that, yeah, they were running 2 separate production lines of it. And so what Mesa had done was
That's so lame.
they had started getting the new version of the speaker and they went, wait a minute, what did you do to our speaker? Oh, we're making
Yeah.
it the new way now. And they were like, no, 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 no. We want what we've been buying. So they assigned a new T number to Mesa to continue to make the speaker the old way, and then assigned a new T number to the changed version that they sold to OEMs
That
everywhere
everybody
around.
else gets. Yeah. Yeah. Without telling
Right.
them that this is what they're getting
And
for the same
and
price that
so
they
the way
previously
that
paid.
you had to the way that you had to get upstream of that little sort of inside knowledge was you had to contact them and say, I hear a difference. And then they would get a guy on the phone and he'd go like, oh, you can hear a difference? Describe the difference. And I go, here's the difference, blah, blah, blah. It does this, it does this. We have all this test equipment. We've done evaluations. We've done this and that. And blah, blah, blah. He goes, a little bit of silence for a second. He goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. And we do, and we run 2
Yeah.
production lines. And if
Come
you
on
want
in
it
the
done
back
that way,
room, son.
yeah, yeah.
Let's have a meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you had to have the right, the right door knock, right? And the right handshake and all this kind of, and that's when we kind of like went, you know what, this is crap. But that happened around, 93, 94,
Oh,
something
you can't
around that
hear this?
time.
Let me turn it up for you.
So that's the answer to that. And
Nigel, that's interesting that you can really hear that much of a difference between those speakers.
you definitely can. The low, there's more girth in the low mids for sure. Let's see. And then
And
our
Michael
buddy
had a
that,
question about the Aether.
yeah. Um, uh, yes, we had to switch suppliers for the chassis. The old supplier had closed their production for a while, and so they weren't available. And so we had been starting using a new sheet metal supplier. somebody that we've been using for a really long time, and then they had moved and we hadn't used them for a while, and then we started using them again a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. We started using them again, and a really good sheet metal supplier, but they never made the Aether chassis. So when it came time to start planning a new Aether production, which we didn't know when that was going to be, we started having to think about, okay, we need to get this new alternate sheet metal supplier up to speed on this chassis, because it's kind of complex. There's a lot of pieces to it, and um, so we recently sent them all the drawings. We updated the drawings so that they were legible, because they were originally on several sheets of paper and they were like kind of a mess. So the project was that I had to go through all the drawings and vet them out and make sure that I had all the latest revisions and incorporate those all into new accurate vetted drawings for a new supplier, so they wouldn't have to go through this whole learning process that we had to go through previously. So we did that last week, sent them the drawings. They've asked us the questions that a supplier would normally ask. What about this band? What about this notation? Did you mean this instead of that? Clarifying the English like they always do. Every supplier does that. They have slightly different ways of doing things, so they pitch questions back at you. We just want to make sure that we understand the intent of the drawing on this page, blah, 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 this dimension, blah, blah, blah. We went through that whole process last week. So now they have the
Also known
drawings,
as the CYA process.
and now they know how to make the stuff. Now they're getting ready to actually do a run. And that's probably
Awesome.
it's going to take the time it's going to take, usually 6 to 8 weeks. And once we get to this point where they sort of understand what they're making, and get everything all sorted out, and then so once we know when that's going to be, then we can start bringing in the parts, the rest of the parts. We'll make the cabinets. We already have the speakers in stock. The transformers are made locally, so they don't take long to get. So once we get the chassis thing sorted out, the whole rest of the stew is pretty easy to follow through on. The only real problem at that point then is they're really time consuming to produce, and we're going to make a fair amount of them because the demand for it has been going up. So that means that our assembly staff is going to have to we're going to have to set aside some time for them to be able to produce a handful of these at a time, while doing all the power stations that we're doing all the power amps that we're doing,
PLIRs.
the LX2, the 292, the 252, the Deliverance demand, the new product design. The PLAR is coming. This is another little update. You people have been asking about the PLR. It is actually, we're, like I said before, we're all done. We're just waiting for the final parts to arrive so that we can complete the production and ship them out. And we got a notification, I think, at the end of last week, that those parts are in have been shipped. So we're waiting for those to arrive, and that'll
You
take
didn't even mention the GPDI.
a few weeks. I didn't mention the GPDI. You had to go fucking drag that out. But the GPDI, once we've gone through this other process with a PLIR, which was mostly involved in incorporating the IR facility into it. That's already been done now. So therefore, it's done for the GPDI as well. Also, the GPDI is using a new power supply that will give it a better performance and lower noise and less weight, and a universal AC input. So we don't have to have a European version and a Japanese version and an American version. We're just like, they all use the same voltage, and so they'll work in any environment, which makes it a lot easier to use. And we get people that are touring, hey, or moving around the globe. I'm working for this company. I'm stationed in Japan for a while, and then I'm going to be in Europe for a while, and then I'm going to be in the US. And how do I get this rewired, and blah blah blah. So it takes care of all that. So the GPDI is coming along really great. The new power supply that we designed for it is way good, and it doesn't use that
Way
it
good.
doesn't it doesn't use that big transformer inside anymore. So it runs cooler, it's lighter, it's going to be more reliable, and it is going to be way noise free on the
I've seen
current
it.
on the current
I've seen that
GPDI. When
transformer.
you turn the D2 output level way up, you can hear a little background noise floor, and that's gone with the new one. So
This new one is baffling. Like you look at it, you're
Yeah,
like, how can
it's
it
great.
possibly do what it's doing? It's incredible.
And we're not going to change, Michael Torin. We're not going to change the performance of the GPDI. We're just going to add some features to it. The original performance of the thing is going to stay, and it's going to be, and it's going to sound really good. It's going to still have that dynamic attack punch. We're thinking we may not even have to use the fan inside it. We may put it in there and
Whoa.
set it up with a thermal switch so that if it gets really hot, then the fan would come on. But I don't. We may not need that. The heat in the current one came from the power transformer
Right.
and the tubes. And the new power supply is very efficient. It's like the old power supply was like 40-50% efficient. The new power transformer is like 85. The new power supply is about 85 to 90% efficient. So for the amount of power that it draws, it'll put out 90% less heat. So the remaining heat that it generates will come from the preamp tubes. And that may not be enough to warrant putting in a fan. And if it is, we could probably mount the fan differently so that it isn't blowing out the top and that you might hear the sound of the fan rotating. We could maybe mitigate some of that noise. Some people are really, really, I think, extremely overbearingly sensitive to fan noise. And
Man,
sitting around here like in the man cave with 3 units that have fans on it, yeah, I can see how people sort of get bugged by that. It doesn't really bother me because I know they need to be in there to really make the product reliable. But I also understand that people get bugged by that, and so we're thinking about if we can mitigate that and reduce the level of that in the new product. And if we can, we will. Great. But I'm really super stoked about the GPDI because it's going to be great.
I'm
And then
excited to hear it simply because
then
it's
we've
my
got
main amplifier.
5 new products in development that we haven't even talked about yet. So that's the craziness that's going on here.
Steve, let's wrap it up, man. We've been on for
Thanks,
3 damn hours.
everybody. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. It's a great hang. I've been seeing some of you guys talking on some of the forums where people are going, "Oh, these guys are just blowhards, spending 2-3 hours yakking," and it's a hang. And your responses back to them have been, "Hey, it's a hang. It's Geeksville. It's a hang, and
It is what
we
it
dig it."
is.
So thank you for the support. Thank you for being part of the hang. You guys are a big part of the hang. You give us these great questions. You give us great feedback and funny stories, and that was great to hear about Link Ray getting banned. That just makes me love him even more, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't it
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I always learn something new from the comments, and you guys always make me chuckle. Great sense of humor. Great collective sense of humor.
Thanks for the Joe, for your hard work and participation as always. It's great. We're probably going to talk less between Joe and me about what we're going to talk about in the show in advance, and just screw it. Every time we get together and talk, we end up talking an hour to 2 hours about what we're going to talk about, and then we
Yeah.
go, you know
Every
what,
Monday
this was a
morning, we
show.
basically do a show,
Yeah,
but
and
it's just
so
us on a Zoom
we're just
call.
gonna stop doing that, and it's just gonna be a show, and we'll talk about
Yeah.
whatever we talk about, and we'll answer your questions, and we'll answer more of them whenever you have those questions.
Yeah.
So,
And I
yep,
would say, along the lines of what Steve was saying, it definitely drop in the comments of the video if you have topics or things you'd like to see us cover in here, because we can do entire episodes kind of by request, and we would love to do that sort of thing. So any suggestions you guys have, please throw them our way, and we'll do our best to cover that stuff.
subscribe, like, share, help us get the word out. We'd like to reach more people because we know that there's more geeks out there than uh, that are probably
We
missing
need
out
more
on the good times.
malcontents.
We know there's more malcontents, and
Absolutely.
we want to reach the malcontents and swing a beer. So
Hell
thanks
yeah.
again. Thanks, Joe. Love you guys. And see you in 2 weeks.